you going to be here?
I'll be here.
I'll try to remember that.
It's the first year I have a married
Now you got that image.
so
Better.
You're ready to live and you're ready to go.
it's negotiating when they'll have time to be here in Austin.
Okay. Where do they live?
His family lives in Brandon.
Oh, okay.
They're living in Dallas.
The City Council for the City of Rollingwood will come to order Wednesday, November 15th, 2023 at 7:01 p.m. And we will start with roll call with Ms. Brown.
Brooke Brown.
Alec Robinson.
Kevin Glasheen.
Phil McDuffie.
Give Sarah a minute.
Sarah Hudson.
And Gavin Massengill. Being quorum present, we will move on to agenda item number 2, swearing in ceremony of elected officials. Swearing in ceremony of newly elected officials. Councilmember Brooke Brown, Councilmember Phil McDuffie, and Councilmember Alec Robinson. Congratulations, you three, for your vigorous campaigns and re-election. And with that, Judge, thank you. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Okay.
So stand, raise your right hand, and repeat after me. I, Alec Robinson,
I, Alec Robinson,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of council member
of council member
for the city of Rollingwood
for the City of Rollingwood
of the state of Texas,
of the State of Texas,
and will to
the
best of my ability,
best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution
the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state,
so help me God.
so help me God.
We'll sign.
I thank you.
All right, just stand and raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Brooke Brown,
I, Brooke Brown,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of council member
of council member
for the city of
for
Rollingwood
the City of Rollingwood
of the state of Texas,
of the State of Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution
the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state.
so help me God.
So help me God. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay.
Hold it on. Just stand and raise your right hand. Please repeat after me. I, Phil McDuffie,
I, Phil McDuffie,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of council member
of council member
for the city of
for
Rollingwood
the City of Rollingwood
of the state of Texas,
of the State of Texas,
and will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution
the Constitution
and laws of the United States
and laws of the United States
and of this state,
and of this state,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you again, council members, and welcome back, you three. And I just want to, while we have Judge Teton here, thank you again for being here. We don't get to swear you in very often, so thanks for being here, our municipal judge. You do a great job for us, and we appreciate you being a neighbor and our judge. So, thank you. You're welcome to stay all night. She's like, I'm judicial branch. I'm out of here. We don't get to hear from our judicial branch very often. So. Okay, and before I move on, I see Shanti. You just told me 5 minutes ago that you wanted to speak. So
You have a lot in your mind.
you're recognized. Please recognize yourself.
Okay. Shanti Jayakumar, 3309 Park Hills Drive. Mayor, council members, Today, we celebrate an annual tradition of confirming the election of 3 candidates who have just taken the oath of office to serve our community for another 2 years. The City of Rollingwood elects a mayor and 2 council members every even number year and 3 council members every odd number year. I think most of you knew that. In the absence of a contested election this year, the 3 incumbent council members continues to serve our community. Congratulations to Brooke Brown, Phil McDuffie, and Alec Robinson. Thank you for your past service to our city and for continuing to serve us for another 2 years. Some of you have expressed a desire to know more about Rollingwood and its early days, and I have a partiality to share that information. So indulge me for a few minutes. I want to share something. So I thought I would share a few highlights of the very first election that we had in Rollingwood, August of 1955, the year Rollingwood became incorporated as the village of Rollingwood. And at an election in October 1955, when the citizens elected a mayor, 5 aldermen, and a sheriff, the appropriate number of candidates for the positions needed to operate the newly incorporated village of Rollingwood. Now, thanks to the generosity of Frank Schofield, who is the son of Frank L. Schofield, our very first mayor, and my neighbor, he loaned me a lot of documents, and I have a copy of the document that describes the process used to conduct the election. Thought y'all might be interested. On July 22nd, 1955, George B. Hadley and his brother, who developed the entire area, and 20 other persons, I'm reading as it was in the thing, filed a petition accompanied by a copy of the plat, meets and bounds, of the plat, showing the corporate limits of the proposed village of Rollingwood with the Travis County judge. Okay. Then on August 8th, 1955, an election was held at 3105 Rogers Avenue. I don't think that Rogers Avenue exists anymore, but I think the name changed, and I do not know. Again, in quotations, to determine whether or not the qualified voters residing within the proposed corporate limits of the village of Rollingwood desire to incorporate the said village of Rollingwood into a body corporate for municipal purposes under the provisions of Chapter 11, Title 28, Revised Civil Statutes of Texas, 1925. Then the judge signs a copy of the results certifying that at that said election there were 47 votes, of which 44 wanted to be incorporated, 3 did not want to be incorporated. That document is signed by the presiding judge and 2 other judges, and then it was filed along with the plat with the deeds records of Travis County. Then, so who voted in this election? And again, in quotations, every person who has attained the age of 21 years and who has resided within the limits of the proposed village of Rollingwood for 6 months preceding is a qualified elector under the laws of the state of Texas and shall be entitled to vote at the election. The sheriff of the county shall give notice of the election by posting a notice at 3 public places in the village of Rollingwood 10 days prior to the date of the said election. Next, on October 1st, 1955, so now we are incorporated, now they have to have an election for the requisite leaders. An election was held for the purpose of filling municipal offices, the village of Rollingwood, Travis County, Texas, pursuant to the election held to incorporate, which was done in August 8, 1955. So it was an uncontested election. There were just 5 people, 6 people, 1 mayor, 5 aldermen, and the sheriff. And they were all elected. And this was the very first election held to elect the very first mayor and alderman for the village of Rollingwood in 1955. This is the story of our humble but proud beginnings. So that was 68 years ago. I thought y'all might like to know that. And at some point, those original documents that I have copies of will be given to you when you have a place to secure.
Thank you, Shanti. Always appreciate the history lesson. If you would, too, allow Desiree to run a copy of that. We'll put that in the minutes in case anyone wants to.
Or if you want to.
I like putting things in the record like that so I can go back and find them instead of just asking Ashley to locate it 5 years later. Okay, thank you for that. And we will now move on to, off of agenda item number 2, on to public comments. Desiree, do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Hello. Come right up. Identify yourself for the record. Welcome.
I'm Amy Rodnick. I live at 3017 Hatley Drive, and thank you all for serving another term on the council. I have been in your position before, and I respect very much that you're doing it and not me right now. But what I'm here to speak about tonight, I'm not really speaking about item 15 on the agenda, which has to do with noise pollution from the sport court, but another kind of noise pollution that we're experiencing in Rollingwood, and that has to do with gas-powered leaf blowers. And I have stood on my front porch with with a meter, trying to determine how loud these things are. And from my front porch on the neighboring yards, it is 85 decibels. And in addition, if we want to be an eco-city, right now, gas-powered leaf blowers emit as much in pollutants as driving a Toyota Camry from Denver to Los Angeles. A number of cities around the country are trying to ban them. I have to unfortunately inform you all that thanks to the state government in Texas, we cannot ban them here because there was a law passed in May that said that cities and municipalities cannot ban a mechanical object based on its fuel source, which seems to be directed at the city of Dallas, which was attempting to do just that. However, I want to say that these things not only emit pollutants which contribute to climate change, but they are incredibly loud, and we still do have the ability to regulate noise and decibel levels. In addition, there is nothing that I can see that would stop the city from offering positive incentives for landscapers in Rollingwood to use electric power or battery-powered leaf blowers or mowers. And by incentives, one thought I had would be to post on our city website the names of landscaping companies that are willing to not use gas-powered leaf blowers and mowers. And maybe a lot of our residents would then choose to patronize these businesses. So that's one option that we could have. But in addition, the city can regulate decibel levels. And so I don't necessarily have a suggestion as to what decibel level would be acceptable. But if somebody had a rock band and was playing it at the decibel level that we hear these leaf blowers playing at, and I work from home, I am on Zoom meetings, and sometimes I can hardly hear myself if something's right next door. I think that it's time that we really look at noise pollution and what incentives we have, such as positive incentives even, to patronize. I mean, I personally will not patronize a landscaping company that uses gas mowers and gas leaf blowers. So maybe we can accomplish something here and get these abominations out of our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rodnick. Desiree, any others? Okay, great. Moving.
I did leave some materials with Desiree.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, moving off of public comment, we will move on to agenda item number 3. Public hearing, discussion, and possible action regarding an amendment to the city's code of ordinances related to sport courts. I will, for the good of the audience, I want to clarify the difference between 3 and 15, and also give notice that to council that my plan is to move agenda item number 15 up in the agenda later this evening, a little bit sooner after we get through with K-Freeze, with some reports that we need to allow them to give and release them for the evening. To clarify, agenda item number 3, this is a definitional change that council brought up. I believe this was Ms. Hudson's agenda item that we then sent to Planning and Zoning Commission for their consideration. It's a definitional change, and I'll talk a little bit more about that specifically when we get done with the public hearing. But it's the definitional change, and then the regulatory components and the regulatory discussion that I think council would like to have with a number of people here in the audience will be under 15. So 3 is pretty cut and dried. The more in-depth policy discussion will be held for 15. With that, I will open the public hearing on agenda item number 3 at 7:17 p.m. And allow anyone wishing to testify on the definitional change in agenda item number 3 to testify at this time. Nothing? Okay, with that, we will close the public hearing at 7:17 and turn to council for their comments. I'm happy to have a motion. You do have the ordinance in front of you, council, 2023-11-1503. You'll see the a change of the word tennis to the word sport, and then also adding the definition of sport court that we worked with our legal counsel on. Again, this is a definitional change. Appreciate Councilwoman Hudson bringing it to us. To clarify, and for the audience also, just so everyone knows, this is how the code has been being interpreted by our planners and our reviewers. So it's really just tightening up the code, making sure that we're consistent with our current practice. With that, I'll open it to council.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I would move that we adopt ordinance 2023-11-15-03.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Yeah, we did. It was a minute, 30 seconds. You have a motion by Ms. Brown and a second by Mr. McDuffie. Is there discussion? Yes, ma'am.
The only discussion that I have is that I did a quick Google search on Municode for the word tennis,
Yes, ma'am.
and we've not caught all the sections of the code that use tennis court. So there's
Okay.
there's section 103-43, 103-86, and 103-88 that we probably need to conform. I don't think it restricts adoption of this ordinance, but I do think we need council to take a look at that and clear it up. Those have to do with washing tennis courts
Okay.
primarily.
Okay.
And use of water during drought.
Good
Wash
catch.
tennis courts, so.
Let me
But it
cons-
does use that term, so I think we need to conform it.
I'm going to consult with council real quick, and I'll be back to you in 5 seconds. What were those sections again, Councilwoman?
103-43, 103-86, 103-88. And I don't know that there's zoning provisions, so I don't know that we have to have
that's what I was
another
gonna-
public hearing, but
Right, there's a whole different section of the code, it's not the zoning section, so we would have to bring it.
I
Yeah.
couldn't hear you.
I apologize, it is a different section of the code, so we would have to bring that back.
Okay. I was going to try to do it in a.
Yes, I recognize.
You knew where I was going, but okay, we will bring that back. Will you make a note? Okay. Any other further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. And I think there was an aye by Ms. Hudson as well. So
Yes.
there being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on from agenda item number 3, we will move to the consent agenda, and I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve consent agenda?
You have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Mr. Robinson. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Mr. Robinson, a second by Ms. Brown. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. I'm going to give Sarah.
Aye.
There being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on to the regular agenda. Agenda item number 7, nomination and election of the mayor pro tempore for a term of 1 year and to perform the duties of the mayor in the mayor's absence. As has been our practice, council, this I'll make a recommendation to you. This is your decision to make by nomination through a motion and your election. I would hope that you would stick with Ms. Hudson. I think she's done a great job the past year and deserves to stay in that role, but it is your decision to make, and I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that we appoint Sarah Hudson as Mayor Pro Tem.
You have a-
Elect Sarah Hudson as Mayor Pro Tem.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown and a second by Mr. McDuffie. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
I will abstain.
I knew that was what you were going to do. So there being 4 ayes, 1 abstention, the motion carries. Thank you, council. Congratulations, Mayor Pro Tem Hudson. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda number 8, update on the water CIP packages 1 through 4 and drainage projects. This is my agenda item. Wanted to give you a brief update. Council met between our last regularly scheduled meeting and this meeting, and we did select, you selected AO Services to proceed with our bond package A, which includes our water our infrastructure improvement plan items 1 through 4, as well as all of the alternatives that were included in that in those packages, which would be the addition of the repaving of the streets after each one of those projects. Very excited about this. We've been hard at work ever since your action at that last special council meeting. This will also include the 2 drainage projects that we've worked very hard on in the city for the last 8 years in one instance. So really happy to get those cranking. I know the neighbors who will be affected by those drainage projects will be too. Greg, I'd like you to come up real quickly and just give a quick recap. I know we've had a number of Zoom meetings with AO Services. We've met with you. I think we've got some good things in the works, but would you just give us a real quick Cliff's Notes version of what we've been doing and what our next steps are?
Yeah, so once, first off, good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to see y'all again. So once we, AO Services was selected last week, they have started assembling the contract documents, everything that they need to sign and getting their bonds in order. Actually spoke with them today, and they're in the process of doing that. Looking forward, that will take them a couple weeks to get on order. They'll deliver it to us. Then we'll have the city execute, and then looking like December timeframe that we'll be able to do a pre-construction meeting with them. We have met with them, just talked about general project phasing. You know, they are very flexible and are willing to work with us to whatever phasing in the water projects that make the most sense. You know, in general, we're going to go packages 1 through 4. If there's a reason to make that change, they're definitely willing to work with us on that, which is good. Trying to think anything else you wanted me to
We've
cover.
also
on
had
that?
a good some back and forth. We're scheduled to meet with Robert Dial, bring
Correct.
him on board. I think we've got good discussions going there too. He was excited to be notified that he'll be brought on board to help us with our construction oversight efforts. So I think we're in good shape. Thank you for your work,
Absolutely.
and just stay with AO and let us know when they get their bonding package
Okay.
to us.
I think one thing I will mention, I think Councilmember Brown, you mentioned last time about the holidays. They even suggested that we hold off and don't start until after the first of the year, especially with the pre-construction meeting coming up in December. They'd only get a week or 2 of work in, and if council and the city's okay, we might as well just give them the month of December to order materials, get grouped, and then hit it strong after the holidays.
That was going to be my. Still want us working through
Yeah.
doing all of our pre-construction stuff, but not pushing dirt through the holidays is fine with me. So, okay.
Good, thank you.
Of course.
And we'll be doing, once we get a more definitive sense of timing and that sort of thing, we're going to, as we promised, stay in communication with the community and kind of let them know where we are in the project and what the next steps are. So,
Absolutely.
thank you for that. Just why don't you stay there, stay put, and we'll move off of agenda item number 8 and on to agenda item number 9. Update and discussion on a memo from K. Freeze and Associates regarding how as-built from the water CIP packages 1 through 4 will be shared with the city for inclusion on the city's GIS map. This was a discussion that we had at the last regularly scheduled city council meeting. We rescheduled that formally for the special council meeting. This is Ms. Brown's item that she astutely put in front of us to make sure that we were very clear in our process, to make sure that we are not following our previous practice from years past of being remiss in how we actually get our recorded documents that we own. And so you were good to work through. I think there was already, Ms. Brown went through the contract and noted a number of places where you're required to do that activity. We provided that to K. Freeze, and the result of that, as well as your documentation on your suggested approach, is what they used to put this memo together. And with that, tell us what's in the memo.
Yeah, so we just went through. I appreciate you going through that. Went through the memo and just all the deliverables that we owe to the city throughout the project. Pre-construction phase. Once we finished and sealed all of our plans, go to bidding. We submitted our PDF drawings of the plans and also the PDF of the contract documents to the city in September. Following the bidding period, we made any of the changes that were made during the bid phase. Updated the plans and submitted conformed documents, both plans and contract documents to the city in PDF form, and have submitted our electronic CAD files as well. So that's pre-construction. Going through construction, the contractor, AO Services, is going to be required to keep track of field changes via what we call red lines. So they will literally mark on the plan sheets any changes that were made, through the direction of us or the construction oversight, Robert Dial. And each month when they submit their pay application, they are required to also submit these red lines. And the main reason to do that is just to make sure that they're staying on top of it. We aren't going to make any of these changes during construction itself, but once construction's over, we will get a compiled plan sets that have all the changes, and we will go through and make all those changes in our electronic CAD files. We will then provide the city with PDF copies of the final record drawings, as well as the revised CAD files as well. And those CAD files can be converted to GIS, where then we will then get them uploaded to the city's GIS system following construction.
Okay.
So.
I appreciate
Good to
you.
me.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Councilwoman. I appreciate you bringing this item. It is important. We've talked about it in a number of project contexts in the past. I think this will be a really good, not necessarily a trial run, because I think you've been doing, but these are our first set of big projects, and so I think it's important that we really get it right. So I appreciate you bringing it. I appreciate you putting some clarity to how that process is going to be. So let's make sure we stay on top of it.
Absolutely.
Any other questions, Council? All right, hearing none, we will move off of agenda item number 9 and move on to agenda item number 10. Update and discussion and possible action on the Pickwick Lane structure fire and response. Greg, stay close, but I'm actually going to break this into 2 parts. I want to first talk about the actual emergency response and call on Chief Munoz to step to the dais. Chief, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. I wanted to tell you first in front of everyone, thank you. Really impressed by your team's emergency response and working with our public works crew. I happened to be home on this day, and so I got to see and work with you guys firsthand. And it was a first class operation, and it was a very chaotic time. So, thank you for keeping me and Ms. Wayman up to speed in real time as it was occurring. I know it was a little bit hectic the day of, but why don't you just give a quick report of how that immediate real-time response occurred. Tell us kind of where we are in our after-event wrap-up. I'll jump into with some of our post-event meetings that we've had, and then I'm going to use that to kind of step into a discussion with Greg.
Okay, so we did receive the call for the fire, or originally one of our officers actually saw the smoke and went and did some investigation and was able to confirm to the fire department that there was smoke inside the residence. Unfortunately, the flames did start taking off within about 6 minutes after the initial smoke investigation. So the response was, we had 3 of Rollingwood officers, we had a Westlake Hills officer, and then AFD responded along with ESD 9. And due to the amount of firefighters and smoke, that was coming from the structure, we ended up having to expand our closures. And so APD sent us 3 units, and also JP3 sent us a unit as well, or Constables 3. And so with that being said, we were able to let fire do their job. Our main job was to provide protection or a perimeter around the structure. That way they can get their apparatus in and out in a safe manner. And also we did some evac, or notifications as well for them. And then, like I said, it was just basically traffic control is what we provided. We did do a debrief with fire department along with city officials as well to kind of debrief that situation. And we also have more meetings that are coming up as well, just so that we can break down, look at the command center, and then also like radio response. Unfortunately, the way our radios are set up, we just kind of talk to fire on a back channel that gets walked on by the main channel. And so we're working through some of that, but we were able to relay information to city officials by cell phone. And so, so everything actually did work out pretty seamlessly.
Again, thank you, and thanks to ESD 9 and the fire department. They did a really great job. It's one thing to see fire command at Rollingwood Night Out when they roll it out and show you all the stuff, but it's a little different when the backdrop is an actual fire. So it's
Right.
we got the kids like to play with they really enjoyed it Night Out to see the drone that was over the ball fields. But then the day of, they actually had that same drone, and it was hovering over the fire directing where they needed to direct the water. So it was sobering to see that in real time and see it actually occur. But I think they did a great job, and they were really spot on. Also, kudos to our Public Works Department. They did a great job in helping troubleshoot some pressure issues that we were experiencing at the time. They did that. They also helped, I think, direct traffic in one portion of the city. So the entire team. Ashley was here making calls to. It's little things too. It's no pun intended, but baptism by fire on a project like this really kind of highlights. Ironically, just that morning we had our all staff meeting. And we were having a discussion about needing to have some checklists and emergency preparedness and making sure that we were all squared away on some of that. Little did we know 4 hours later we would be tested on some of that. So, but it was little things that I think we learned from the experience. It was helpful also that it was in the middle of the day. So we had all of our staff here. We were fully staffed at PD. So it was a terrible situation, but it was from an emergency response standpoint, I think it was the best that we could have hoped for, and we learned a lot from it, and we have some good follow-up to do from that. So I think, all in all, I was very pleased with everyone's response. Little things that come up in a situation like that. Someone posted to the WhatsApp, we need to make sure that the school knows so that the buses don't run. I mean, that's not something that's on the checklist until you're in the moment and you think, oh, yeah, well, that's probably a good idea. So, Ashley was talking to Eanes ISD. We had Michaela working on the rave to get that notice out. We used WhatsApp as well. Again, we were experiencing some pressure issues. We'll talk a little bit more about that with Greg, but the ability to communicate quickly and decisively with the community as a whole is a real testament to living in a small town, first of all, but our ability to ask everyone politely, hey, if you could not take a shower or use your water for the next few hours while we try to build the pressure in the system. You hate to have something like that happen, but when it does and you're able to respond in a really micro way like that, it reminds you why we live here. So anyway.
And I would also like to publicly tell the residents how much we appreciate the, response with us as well, as far as in being respectful, as staying kind of back and out of the way as well. And they responded very well on scene. Everybody wants to go and look, and we understand that, but they were able to stay back and kind of out of the way and letting everybody work. So we definitely appreciate that as well.
And the report that we got and I don't want to get too much in detail, I know it's an active investigation, but that's my point. It is still an active investigation, correct?
That is correct.
The fire department is working hand in hand with the insurance company. It is locked up and fenced off.
That is correct. And the fire marshal's office is going to be the point of contact for that investigation. They are the ones that are overseeing, like you said, and working hand in hand with the insurance company.
And you and the fire department also in communication with the surrounding neighbors and answering those concerns and that sort of
That's
thing?
correct.
Okay. Okay, anything else that we've forgotten, Ms. Wayman?
Quick note, when we had a little debriefing meeting, we were speaking with Chief Wilson of the Westlake Fire Department, and we were just kind of talking about the plans we had been discussing to possibly keep a unit here at City Hall as we work in that new, with the City Hall renovation. And while, of course, it wouldn't have been a large truck that could have, likely put out the fire immediately, there was discussion that when you get these kind of calls in, witness calls are not always 100% what the fire department needs to know. So not everyone knows how to describe enough to them what's going on so that they can respond adequately. So he mentioned that would have been something that probably the response would have been a little quicker in understanding exactly what was happening and the gravity of the situation, and it could have possibly had an impact. So just another good thing to note as we're moving into our facilities discussion very soon.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, there's no way to know what could have happened, but in a situation like that, when you're dealing in seconds and minutes in terms of response time, even having that initial vehicle that would have responded from here, even if it only had a few hundred gallons in the tank to suppress what was there, that would have also then sped up a larger response by a minute or two. I mean, those in that type of emergency situation, it adds up quickly. So,
Correct.
So it is further proof, I think, that we're on the right track in a lot of things that we're doing here to try to get that co-located facility that we're working on with them. So, anyway, yes, ma'am.
Will the new radios help with the communication in an event
Yeah, so
like
it's
this?
not so much, it's a channel issue.
Oh, not a
And so
device.
we were working on the law enforcement side of the radio, and they're working on the fire side. And so, like I said, it's just, we have decided that one officer would be at the command post on the actual fire side that can relay. So it's just,
Good.
like I said, small things like that, but I mean, our communication on scene was fine. It was just, we were having to just kind of do it a little differently.
And it's those logistics that we will make sure that we roll into our checklist.
Correct.
And so we'll have, it'll literally say, dispatch one PD person to fire command.
Right.
So that you have that. And
makes sense.
and it's just
Right,
things
right.
like that you don't think about until you're in it. So.
So, yeah, it was just, like I said, small things. It wasn't anything that was concerning.
But it is why we've met. So we had a big group meeting with Fire, PD, Crossroads, Public Utility, us, to have that exact type of conversation, like what worked, what didn't work, what could have been better. I think the consensus of the group was all things said, like this was a really solid response. But there's always little tweaks that you can make to make it better. So anyway.
That size of fire and then it didn't get beyond that property.
Yeah, and I will
That's
say,
an incredible result.
Yeah, the fire department, they were, I think, definitely proud of that fact that they were able to.
100%, that they were able to keep it to
Yes.
the one residence.
Yeah.
So-
Thanks, Chief.
problem.
Thank you to your team as well. Please
Of
pass
course.
that on, Greg. So I did mention, I think all told, we had, like I said, a really solid response. We did experience some pressure issues. They were not insurmountable, we were always pulling water off of the system, but it did occur to us that we need to look at this and do some pressure flow testing, which we've done a little bit of. I think you've been involved with that with Crossroads and our Public Works team. Two things. One, I want you to convey that the bond A that we're about to start work on, that we just talked about, a lot of that is about increasing pressure on the system. But talk to us a little bit. So we're on the right track there. But talk to us about flow versus pressure, and kind of that discussion that we had with Crossroads, and kind of what we're looking at to make sure that we're ready. God forbid we have this again, but that we're ready in the instance that we do.
Yeah. So first off, one of our high priority projects in package 2 of the CIP bond is to increase the fire flow availability at Pickwick. So that first fire hydrant they were pulling off of is one of those that we identified as having too low a flow. So that's one of the high priority projects that we are going to be working on.
And pause there. So some of those may actually get moved up in the bond. When we're phasing too, we're going to keep some of this in mind. I'm going to talk to you a minute about a capital hydrant flow test that we've done several years ago, but it's probably time to do again. But just to let everybody know, we will be keeping these discussions that we have in the field related to flow and pressure, and where we need to, we're going to move some of those up the food chain in terms of the phasing over the next year for the bond.
Correct. Yeah, and so when we first heard that there was pressure issues, that was the first thing that we did is we went and looked in the water model, and it did show that it wasn't meeting the fire flow, but it seemed to be enough that it wasn't matching up what we were seeing in the field. So one thing we requested is to get some fire flow testing done at the hydrants that they were using. I haven't seen that yet, but once we get that, we will check it against the model and see. I think one thing to note, this is a pretty large fire, and they were using a lot more equipment than they would typically would. 1,500 GPM of fire flow is what the design standard is, and the fire department was familiar with that from previous studies, so that's not a surprise to them. Some of the issues are this fire was in the higher of the 2 pressure planes, and so the connection to the City of Austin supply on Riley, it wasn't much of a help because the pressure can't go back up from the low pressure plane to the high pressure plane. And so the fire department ended up connecting to a hydrant on Stratford, and running some smaller diameter lines to that area so then they can get additional supply. So one thing that we are looking at is potential places where we can install additional emergency interconnects to either the City of Austin or the Westlake water systems. So we would have pressure reducing valves that would only open if there was an emergency like this. The pressure drops in the system below a certain below a certain PSI, and then it would allow additional supply into the system, because that seemed like the issue was that there's just not enough supply points to the system during the event.
Which is a good distinction, and we talked a lot about it at this meeting. There's pressure, and then there's flow, and it was and supply rather, and so it was really, they were pulling so much water off of the system that was really, we kind of talk about it in terms of pressure, but it was really a supply issue as much as anything.
Correct.
And so they were just pulling so much water off the system at once that was kind of the issue. So that's what we're looking at, is how, in that type of instance, how do you get more supply into the system that will then result in the pressure that's needed. So.
Correct.
And we've got a couple of different ideas on how to do that. He just mentioned one. We're going to look at it too. It may be something that we need to come back and actually add to our to-do list with the existing bond revenues. We'll have some more detail on that, but I think the first question is to figure out how to get that supply done, and then there's sort of a temporary fixes that we could do that I think we talked to the fire department about, but we probably will need a more permanent fix once we identify what that is.
Yeah, a couple other things we talked to them about that would help is they don't have a very accurate GIS of the city fire hydrants, and so that's something we're definitely going to provide with them so that they can, as they're going to the fire, they can pull it up on their iPads or whatever they use and identify which hydrants they want to use. in the event of a fire. One thing is we'll update the GIS based on that flow study that the mayor talked about, and if another one's done, we can put in that GIS what the available fire flow is, and then they can color code it on their maps and see what the best hydrants are to use in an event like this, just to help as they prepare, and so they can know what the best thing is.
And that kind of gets to the high plane, low plane issue too, because depending on where the fire is, you're going to be in one of the planes, right? And so it could be, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understood it, you could be in one plane, and you could be tapping all of the other hydrants in that plane, and you're not getting any more juice. But if you have a wherewithal and if it's marked correctly on the map, and you know to tap into the other plane, then you'll actually get extra flow because that's hooked up to another supply source, correct?
Yeah, so if you're in the lower pressure plane, it's better because we have the PRVs that help feed from the higher pressure plane. So consider those additional supply points. If you're in the higher pressure plane, you can't get, like I said, you can't get that water to flow backwards from the lower pressure plane. So that's where, if they're close to that plane boundary, then and they know they can tap into another hydrant that's in the low plane, that just provides another supply and would help. And that's ultimately what they did, not really knowing.
Not knowing what they did. That's ultimately what they did, not knowing that was what they were doing.
Correct. So they were just trying to tap in as much as they could and figure out where they could get water. And
because that Stratford, that's in the higher. That's
the.
It's
lower
not ours, but it's in the higher.
It's
or
the
in the
lower
lower
plane,
plane,
correct.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's backwards. Okay.
Good.
So that's the update. Sorry, it's a little bit in the weeds there, but I felt like it's something you needed to know and know that we're working on. So, thank you, Greg. Any questions for Greg? Well, actually, stay there because I am going to ask council. We would like to. So, Cape Freeze and Crossroads and our Public Works Department, they are doing some spot checks right now on a number of hydrants in that area just to make sure that we've got a good read and that it's marked correctly. We did, 5 years ago?
It's been
About 5 years ago, council did approve to do a full city pressure test or flow test.
Correct.
A flow test on all of our hydrants. We have now added that to our operations chart to repeat that process. 5 years may be a little bit. You definitely need to do it every 5 years. We're probably going to, I think we moved it down to 3 years so that we remember to repeat that process because things do change and there could be a valve that's sticking that's not being exercised or something. So in the future, we're going to do that more often. What I'm asking council for is to give us, and this is posted for action, if you would be willing to give us approval to do a hydrant flow test on all of the city hydrants. We know who to go with. Capital Hydrant is who Crossroads recommends. Capital Hydrant is also who we used 5 years ago. I think it's who you would recommend as well. So if council would be willing to give us approval in an amount not to exceed $15,000, I'd like to go ahead and proceed with that if we could.
And is that a part of item number 10? Or
It is. It is to make sure that we have the and possible action related to the and response would be what it falls under.
okay.
And would that require a budget amendment?
It will. We'll bring that back at our mid-year budget amendment.
Okay. And so do y'all just track all the necessary budget amendments and deal with them mid-year?
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll put it. I mean, we could probably make it work under the Public Works budget, but then we would eventually fall short at the end of the year. So if we could just go ahead and do it now, we'll bring back a mid-year budget amendment for you.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I move to approve giving the mayor authority to proceed with the plans for a fire hydrant flow test in an amount not to exceed $15,000.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. You have a motion by Ms. Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Mr. Glasheen. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. I'm going to go with 5 ayes.
Yep.
I'm going to go with 5 ayes. 5 ayes and no nays. Motion carries. Thank you, council, and we'll get on that. If you'll follow up, we'll get with Crossroads, but if you'll get with us, and let's make sure and get moving with Capital Hydrant.
I do have a quick question about pressure. I've noticed that pressure on the sprinkler system at the park can get real low sometimes where the sprinklers don't work, and apparently it's usually in the evenings. And some other residents have reported low pressure, like in the evening. Are you aware of that? Did y'all do any testing of pressure fluctuations when we designed this water system? And is the system that we're building with the bond package gonna fix that?
When we did the modeling, we didn't see too many pressure issues that weren't a fire flow run. Just the standard usage. We didn't see too many of that, so I'd have to look in to see what that is. We did use 50 psi as our minimum, but it should, because some of these projects are providing additional looping in the system that should help provide, like we said, that supply to move water around the city as needed. So I'm a bit, that's in the high pressure plan, so I'm a bit surprised to hear that. So I'd have to look into that and see kind of what we're showing and look into it a little bit more.
Okay,
So
thanks.
yeah, of course.
All right, thank you, Greg. Let's see. With that, we will move off of agenda item number 10 and move on to agenda item number 11. Should be real quick. Report from staff on the status of the Google Fiber install in coordination with the Waterline project. And Ashley, I believe was this yours or was this Miss Brown's?
Councilmember Brown did ask for this on the agenda, but I do have a quick update.
You
if
have
we're
the
ready for
update.
that.
All
Okay,
right, great.
Actually, I think almost immediately following our last council meeting, a representative who is working with, I guess, the third party that's doing the permitting for Google Fiber reached out to us with a number of questions that they need answered from as far as our permitting process, how they are to submit that and go through all of that. We met with Kay Freese and Associates, talked through all of it, got answers to their questions, and then also followed up with questions of our own that had to do with the timing and things of that nature. So we are planning on in the next couple weeks, possibly after Thanksgiving, to sit down with them. They promised to get that information to the actual Google Fiber team. They were just the permitting team. So we'll be following up with them with a meeting in the coming months, probably very early December, and making sure that our timelines are all understood.
So the permitting team's gonna tell the Google Fiber team that we need to get dates and coordinate with KFA.
Right.
And that will happen after Thanksgiving.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And we've talked to AO that was part of the things we talked to AO Services about, and they totally understand wanting to phase that all, together, so they're willing to work with us on that.
Great.
And Greg, don't let us forget to talk to them again about that in the pre-con meeting, just so that we remind them again. Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions on agenda item number 11? Okay, with that, we will move off of agenda item number 11. I'm going to go off the agenda order slightly and call up agenda item number 15, discussion and possible action to make a recommendation that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and recommend conditions of use, including noise, parking, lighting, etc., associated with residential tennis, pickleball, and other sport courts. This is Ms. Brown's agenda item. I'll recognize Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This issue, Mr. Harris, who's a neighbor of the pickleball court, brought this matter before the last meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and it received considerable discussion at that Planning and Zoning meeting, and Planning and Zoning asked that the council take a look at it and then recommend whether this matter be brought back to Planning and Zoning for further action. So I think it's appropriate at this point in time to get the comments that Mr. Harris presented to Planning and Zoning, and to also get the comments of the other neighbors regarding the impact this pickleball league is having on the neighborhood, and then to have the council give direction whether this whether we take action, whether we send it back to Planning and Zoning. Are there things that we can do at the council level that would address the situation and to get some direction from the council this evening with regard to that situation.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I think we have a few folks wishing to testify. What I'd like to do is if you have a motion to send it, I think your goal is to send it to P&Z, is that correct?
Initially, that was correct, but as I looked at it further during the week, during the last 2 weeks, I think there may be parts of this that can be handled outside of planning and zoning, and so that wouldn't require that that the council refer it to planning and zoning for a recommendation, and so that's what I'd like to address once we have some discussion of the issue, and I'll be happy to walk through that. For example, I think we can address outside of the zoning code noise regulation, lighting regulation, and we do already outside of the zoning code, noise regulation, light regulation, and parking. And so those are the kinds of things I think we should have some discussion about, whether we do it at the council level or send it to planning and zoning.
Okay.
And if I could
Yes, sir.
comment on that?
Yes, sir.
If we do it.
Those were my thoughts, and I wanted to hear what council has to say about it, our legal counsel, but I thought it sounded like a noise issue and a parking issue, and I wasn't aware of it as being a light issue as well, but I thought if it is, I mean, and one thought I had is, can't we just say, no pickleball before 8:30 in the morning or something to that effect as a starting point, and then also address the parking, maybe go to resident-only parking in certain areas if we need to. Those were my initial thoughts.
Well, and there's also a question of, it seems to me what some cities have done is say, you can have pickleball and you can invite your friends to play pickleball, but only if they can park in your driveway.
That seems like that would be a
And
very
so
good solution.
There's a range of options here, and I think it would be good to have a discussion of all that and then see whether it falls into zoning or whether it falls into just general nuisance regulation.
Well, I'd be interested in hearing from the residents about what solutions they think might be effective too, but I like your suggestion of the parking would solve a lot of the problems, because it seems like somebody's running like a sports league out of their house, which is kind of goes beyond what we expect residential use to be. So.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you, Council. I'm going to go ahead and recognize a few folks wishing to testify. We have Glenn Harris wishing to testify on agenda item number 15. Glenn, step right up, identify yourself for the record, and
Hello, I'm Glenn Harris. I live at 3012 Hatley. I have a few points to make that may take about 8 minutes, so I'd like to request the mayor's and the council's permission for that amount of time to speak on this important matter.
Great.
Thank you. Let me first say that I am not trying to stop all pickleball play in the city of Rolling Wood. That is not at all my objective. Instead, I'm seeking a sensible balance between homeowners' rights to enjoy reasonable use of a sport court and neighbors' rights not to be confronted with a nuisance. I'd like to address some questions that were raised in discussion by the city council members at the September 20th meeting. Is there a real difference in pickleball noise versus other court sports? And is this an issue the city needs to tackle? The answers are yes and yes. I've done some research. It turns out that pickleball noise is substantially louder than tennis, and it has to do with both volume and pitch. A pickleball strike has a very high pitch, much like a baby's cry or a backup beeper on a truck. It grabs your attention. I've included several articles in your agenda packet from reputable sources: the New York Times, NPR, RacketSportsWorld.com. There's a common theme in them. Pickleball comes in at about 70 decibels, tennis at 40. Decibels is a nonlinear scale. What that means, those numbers equate to pickleball being 8 times louder than tennis. In addition to the noise of the ball itself, nearby neighbors are treated to competitive trash talk between players. The most interesting news article in your agenda packet is from July this year, a feature article in the Austin American-Statesman on the private pickleball club that plays daily at 3016 Hatley, a private residence. Much of what I'm about to say comes from the contents of that article, as combined with my personal experience living adjacent to that property. A single tennis court at 3016 Hatley was modified earlier this year, a complete resurfacing of that court to accommodate 4 pickleball courts. Let me emphasize that. An original usage model of 1 tennis court on private property is now 4 pickleball courts. That's 16 simultaneous players and 4 pickleballs at the same time. These courts are used by a private pickleball club of over 60 members on a regular and daily basis, Monday through Friday, usually starting at 6:30 a.m. Noise and traffic peaks between 7:30 a.m. and 9 a.m. Games usually wind down sometime around after 10 a.m. That's 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. That's the schedule. Weekend use is more erratic, but weekend evening play often involves 16 to 20 players on site for several hours. I claim it is out of character with a residential environment to have a private residence used on a daily basis as a 60-plus member athletic club. The parking and associated traffic issues, noise, lighting, and time and frequency of play are completely out of character with the reasonable use of a private residential sport court. According to the Statesman article, the homeowner is off-site during the daily early morning pickleball play. There is also a dutifully provided weekly schedule for the 4 courts. Is that how a private residence should be used? With a schedule of use by members of a private club with the host not even present? Is a schedule-based use of a home by a private club how we expect our neighbors' homes to be used? I counted cars of pickleball players on 8 separate days. On average, there are 19 cars parked simultaneously along either side of Hatley Drive at the intersection of Laurel Lane during the morning rush hour period. If you know that street, it's at the top of a hill. There's an intersection and a hill, a sharp drop-off. What's even more eye-opening than the average of 19 cars parked is that across those 8 days, I counted 63 unique vehicles showing up to play pickleball, many on multiple days. Hatley Drive is a main thoroughfare for Rolling Wood, and it's also a main walking, running, and cycling route for many. Pickleball parking on either side of that street effectively reduces that section of Hatley to a 1-lane road. It causes traffic safety concerns due to visibility issues and difficulties for two-way car and pedestrian traffic. So what can be done? I'd like the City Council to strongly consider if the activities at 3016 Hatley fall under the objectionable conditions clause of home occupation in our current code of ordinances. And if so, to take action to stop the use of that private residence as a 60-plus member athletic club. Let me emphasize that I am not asking to stop all pickleball play on private property in Rolling Wood. Instead, I'm asking to not have a private residence be used as an athletic facility. In addition to that, I think shoring up our code of ordinances to clearly stipulate what constitutes reasonable and neighborly use of a sport court is paramount. At a minimum, imposing some of the same restrictions that currently apply to the Rolling Wood Park Zone property, applying those same restrictions to private property seems to be an entirely sensible measure. This includes this ordinance. Organized sports activities or other group outdoor activities are not permitted on city park property before 8:30 a.m. We have a private facility that's being used like a park facility. I think it should be regulated in the same manner, and I think that should apply to all private sport court facilities in our city. Rules to prevent daily and regular excessive car traffic and parking also seem to be necessary. The needle that needs to be threaded is that homeowners must be allowed to use their courts and swimming pools in a reasonable manner for enjoyment by family and friends. This includes the occasional pool party or pickup game amongst a large group of people. There is a fundamental difference between that seldom or occasional large group use of a private residence and a daily scheduled large group use. I would like to emphasize that any private residence that has a sport court can be used in a manner that creates a nuisance for neighbors unless it's properly regulated. Given the trend of tear downs and rebuilds in our neighborhood, the potential for problems to crop up on other properties is real. We currently have a very real problem at 3016 Hatley. I think if we don't take action, it could be a problem on other properties. Lastly, I'd like to address the obvious question. Why shouldn't we just dismiss all of this as, you're the dummy who bought a house next to a tennis court? I indeed did do that. A tennis court that had an entirely reasonable and neighborly usage model with occasional games among friends. Starting around 2020, that usage model evolved significantly to the situation we now have. That's not what my family signed up for when we moved into Rolling Wood, and it's clear that's not what the other residents expect either. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, and thank you for your comments, your reasonable, rational, thoughtful approach. So I appreciate you coming tonight. Council, any questions for Mr. Harris? All right, thank you. Thank you for being here.
I have a question. You didn't address the lighting issue. Could you give us some information about that?
Yes. I believe the ordinances that we have on the books currently address the lighting issue. In August of 2022, I spoke with the city police department officer, Officer Arispe, who does code enforcement, and discussed the problem of lighting on those courts. Officer Arispe encouraged me to speak directly with my neighbor. I did, in an email exchange, point him to the exact code of ordinance item that I felt addressed it. He encouraged me to speak with my neighbor, and I let it drop at that point. That's my fault. But it's clear we have an ordinance, we have a code of, on the books right now. Let's see if I can read it to you, but it's essentially overhead lighting in swimming pool or tennis court areas is prohibited. That structure was permitted, I'm quite sure, as a tennis court. It still is used as a tennis court on occasion. I'm concerned that the property owner may claim that it's a pickleball court, not a tennis court, therefore it can have lights. Officer Arispe cautioned me on that when we spoke well over a year ago, that there are different ways to interpret the rules. So I would certainly like to see that enforced. I don't want to take the council's time now to pursue that, but it's on me as a neighbor to file a formal complaint and understand what that process is, but I do intend to pursue that process.
So it does have lighting now?
It does have overhead lighting. And let me be clear, I'm not the kind of person that runs to city council with my problem without first speaking to my neighbor. I have spoken to my neighbor, property owner of 3016 Hatley, many times over the years. I've addressed it with him as recently as Saturday, November 4th. We had a lengthy discussion, a fair discussion in his driveway, and it became clear that we were at an impasse on what I felt was reasonable use of that property and what he felt was reasonable use of that property. And I informed him that we are at an impasse and my only recourse is to take this concerns to the city council, which is why I'm here tonight.
And is the lighting necessary for that? Do they use the lighting for that 6:30 a.m. time frame? And
Yes, it was particularly important for that before we did the fallback time change. But yes, absolutely. The 6:30 a.m. play is facilitated by lights, and those lights are sometimes on in the evening as well.
okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Mr. Harris. Appreciate it. I will call up Ellen Wilson, I believe is registered to testify. Just to identify yourself for the record, Ms. Wilson.
Ellen Wilson. I live at 3018 Hatley Drive. I also am concerned about pickleball courts. I know the one, at least I'm assuming the one that exists right now close to me was not permitted as a pickleball court. And I think that should be distinctive. You know, every type of court is different, and it should be somehow included in the permits. As far as me as the neighbor on the other side, I'm uphill from the pickleball courts, and I there's the courts, and then the other house, and then me. And I don't hear it that much inside, and I obviously don't have the lights because I have the other residents' house in front of me, so I don't see it. But if I go outside, I can hear it, and it sounds like construction work going on, you know. And you know, if push comes to shove, there should be something where neighbors can't be noisier at different hours than the construction work is. You know, there should at least be some kind of agreement as far as when there's going to be noise and when there's going to be traffic. And also, there's always traffic. There are always cars parked in front of my house. It's annoying, but it's not a problem. But it's annoying. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. And I do think we have someone with their hand raised. Is that Mr. Meakin?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Christopher Meakin, 310 Nixon Drive. I live about 5 houses and 1 street away from the pickleball court, and I hear it constantly beginning at 6:30. I think this can easily be handled by our ordinance 18-54B8, which says no noise above 60 decibels. This is clearly above 60 decibels. And I echo everything and support the Harris family, and I can't believe they had to live next to this for so long. I sincerely hope that council gives them some relief in that. I believe that we should enjoy our property as long as it doesn't substantially interfere with our neighbors' enjoyment of their property and the value of their property. Bless Mr. Harris if he tries to sell his house and someone sees the pickleball court up there and hears the noise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Meakin. Okay, anyone else wishing to testify on agenda item number 15? Ms. Patillo, if you will step up and identify yourself.
Amy Patillo, 3 Rockaway Cove. I really appreciate the comments that Mr. Harris had to put together. And I took a moment to look at this issue as I saw it coming up because it raises a couple of different issues at the same time, potentially outside of just this property. And so I appreciate that the council is looking at potentially just ways to use the existing code without having to go to P&Z. My one comment, if you do send it to P&Z, would be to potentially have them look at the noise and the light and the traffic and all those things. But what's not clear to me right now is whether someone using one of the new apps like that where you can go and you can rent pickleball courts and pools by the hour at private homes, whether our ordinance actually would preclude that type of usage. So as long as it potentially might go, just thought I would throw that in there as something to look at. At some point in time, the usage has become so extreme in this case that it wouldn't be what I had signed up for either if I had moved in next to a tennis court or even a pool next door to a neighbor. So I think the sentiment that was expressed there is strong for me as well, that I can't imagine if suddenly I came home and even the swimming pool, if there was a lap pool next to me, was being rented out and on a schedule to be used. and that wasn't what I knew that I had moved in next to. So appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patillo. Okay, any other comments? Anyone wishing to testify? All right, council, back to you. What you want to do?
Well, what about our noise ordinance? I'm looking it up right now.
I've looked at the ordinances and I'll kind of walk through them if you're interested in
Yes.
doing that, okay?
Great.
The noise ordinance is there's 107-69A3. And then I've got them organized a better way than that. Okay, if you go to the primary noise ordinance is section 18-52. And it describes both impulsive noises and a noise disturbance. A noise disturbance is any sound which annoys or disturbs a reasonable person of normal sensitivities. And prohibited noise, the next section, 18-54, prohibits any person from making, continuing, or causing to be made any noise disturbance. And so it's a bit general, but I think in this case, a complaint could be filed to address that issue, do a study of what the noise decibel level is, and it would probably, the ongoing noise from this situation, this pickleball league, would probably meet that test, in my opinion. That would, there's also, in terms of impulsive noise, there's a section of this same code, 18-54, that says that the use of a device which creates impulsive sound so as to cause a noise disturbance is a prohibited action. So there's a couple of different, then you have section 8 of that same ordinance, which says the operation of any device such that the noise level exceeds 60 decibels on the A band level as measured by a sound level meter at the common boundary of the adjacent property. So that's a very defined standard and probably would be exceeded in this case. So then if you are looking at what's in terms of the timing of the noise and the timing of the activity, our park ordinance says that organized sports activities or other group outdoor activities are not permitted on city park property before 8:30 a.m. So it's an analogous problem. It shows what the expectation is. It's not something that could be enforced against this property, but it certainly shows what the expectation is. Also in our zoning code, the zoning code for residential uses says that only the following uses are allowed in our residential zoning area. So the use has to be expressly permitted to be allowed in the residential zoning area. And operating a pickleball league or anything even close to that is not a permitted use in the residential area. And again, an analogy is in our residential code, after you have here are the uses that are permitted, there's a prohibited usage, and it includes you can't have more than 2 estates, no one resident can have more than 2 estate sales or garage sales a year, for the obvious reason that it creates a lot of disruption in the traffic patterns and noise and people coming and going, and just the same analogous situation that this pickleball league creates. So there's another kind of standard that we can use to evaluate how far out of the ballpark this activity actually is. You don't let people have more than 2 yard sales a year. So there's, if you take all that together with the section of the code that Glenn identified, there are ways to challenge this on a complaint basis. But we also know that we're gonna have other pickleball courts. And as Ms. Patillo brought to mind, there is now an active business promoting its app for rental of private property amenities in residential neighborhoods for the use of the, anyone who wants to rent it, kind of like a swimming pool or barbecue, backyard barbecue or pickleball court, tennis court. We've all, our neighborhood has those kinds of amenities, and it's not the same as a Airbnb rentals, but it's similar. It will bring people who are not your neighbors into the neighborhood for a fee in a way that is not anticipated in a community that's a single family, totally single family community. And so we can debate, whether that's elitist, we can debate a number of policies, but it's not fitting within our code as it's currently written. And so I think we could address this as a complaint. We could also address it, and I think there are good grounds for addressing it as a complaint and a violation of our current code. And we can, but I think we also need to address pickleball more generally. I've found 2 cities that have adopted pickleball regulations, one, Park City, Utah, and Centennial, Colorado. And they regulate, those ordinances regulate the things we're talking about here. The Centennial Colorado ordinance identifies how close you can have, it has zoning aspects of how close you can put a pickleball court in relation to an adjoining residential property. There, it's 600 feet. You wouldn't have a pickleball court in Rollingwood with that setback standard. But it also has usage regulations, noise regulations, the kinds of things we've been talking about. The Park City one is interesting in that it also has the requirement that all guest parking for pickleball purposes shall be on-site parking in residential areas, which would limit the kind of pickleball league. That would, I think Mr. Lowe could probably have 6 cars on his driveway, perhaps, but, it would, it is not the 22 or more that are there today. And so I think maybe we need to do 2 things. Maybe we need to have a complaint on this particular operation as in violation of our current code, and I think we need to address pickleball generally because it is gonna grow. People are gonna wanna have pickleball courts. People are gonna wanna play pickleball. We don't wanna prohibit pickleball completely. We've just adopted regulations that treat it like a tennis court for purposes of setbacks, but it's got aspects that aren't like tennis in that it's noisy and loud and disruptive to neighbors. So I think we could consider my view would be that we do both, that we come back and look at our noise and parking and lighting ordinances to address pickleball, and that we consider proceeding with a complaint on this particular matter. I don't know that that requires city council action, or if I would like some thought from our city attorney on the avenues that are available if the city wanted to bring such a complaint? Could it, or is this a matter for enforcement like we treat other violations of our code that would be brought before municipal court for to be addressed? Or what are our options here?
Counselor?
I would agree that there are probably plenty of provisions in our code currently that could be enforced through the municipal court. That would necessitate the same type of process that we would use for any sort of code violation, and then of course recognizing that a complaint in criminal court requires evidence, requires trial, all the things that we would do, but that is absolutely a process that we can go down, and I will get with staff and look at the facts, look at all the code provisions, take into account the provisions that you presented this evening, and we can go through that for purposes of determining how a complaint could be filed in municipal court. Short of that, it would require changes to your zoning code if you're going to address it more specifically, that in a way that is not currently addressed in your code, which would and there's a variety of ways to do that through zoning. With lighting, you don't have to go through the zoning process. Other processes you can go through, but short of that, there really isn't any avenue of enforcement other than your code of criminal procedure. I'll have to double check the statute to see if this would fall within something that we could impose a civil penalty and go to county court on, but I'm not sure. I think those are health and safety violations, not nuisance violations.
Well, the noise regulation is under our nuisance
Yes, ma'am.
ordinance. So
I would expect that. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. If the lighting ordinance refers to tennis courts, and we're just in the process of correcting that generally anyway before this even came up, but if we change the ordinance and apply the lighting rules to pickleball courts, and this is apparently in violation, is there any grandfathering aspect to that, or can we just say, even though you've got lighting now, we're going to prohibit it?
Well, first, I wouldn't give up on the idea. I haven't read the specific code provisions, but I wouldn't give up on the idea that if it says tennis courts, it can't be interpreted to be inclusive of other types of courts, right? So I wouldn't give up on that thought process.
Sure.
That's something we would absolutely look at. With respect to, you're really talking about a vested rights provision, a vested rights to continue operations of a use. I don't think lighting would be a vested right, but I would just, Chapter 245 tells us all those exceptions, and we would just go look at those exceptions and determine whether or not it is.
And I liked the on-site parking required for your guests for, I don't know how you would define the activity, but could we, and I did see I did find the Centennial in Park City also, they did require that on-site parking. I think if we looked at that code and looked at potentially adopting that kind of language, that would be a good idea.
Sure, we
It'd
would.
be simple.
Yeah, we would just look at how Park City has drafted that legislation locally, make sure that it is consistent with because that Park City is a different state, a different city, different everything. But we would just look and see how that's drafted to see if we can apply it for Texas general law type A city, and we would look at that.
I think it'd be better if we could approach this by making some simple rules, like dealing with the lighting and parking, rather than going through a complaint process that leads to litigation. I mean, the other remedy, of course, is private landowners can bring a private nuisance action as well, but I'm sure that Mr. Harris doesn't want to take his neighbors to court and also doesn't want to incur the expense of it. But I think we also don't necessarily want to incur the expense and be so adversarial that we're going to start criminal complaints over an issue when we could hopefully solve it quickly by adopting some regulations that might be simple and not lead to litigation. And it may be also, another one might be prohibiting pickleball within certain hours of the day. I just think trying to define what is a nuisance and what isn't a nuisance under noise ordinances where we don't have decibel level measurements, except for the one we're talking about continuous noise in our ordinance. I mean, it's just, I see that a bunch of lawyers making a bunch of money arguing over our noise ordinance is my point. But I think we could come up with some solutions that might be more black and white.
I think what I would suggest to council, and I would accept this motion, is for you to direct the city attorney to work with staff and to look at the codes that you've mentioned and that Mr. Harris brought up, do a little bit of an analysis of that, and then maybe offer some potential suggestions along Mr. Glasheen's, or whatever those suggestions may be by the city attorney. I think that's the cleanest way to move forward. It instructs, gives clean instruction to me to pay for that expense of that time by our attorney, and then we can move forward. And I think that would also give maybe some ability to, if there was a private complaint that could be filed, that would give direction on that front as well. So,
I know, of course, I'm not.
No, not for them.
Yeah,
but
of course, private property owners can always file a criminal complaint, and
yeah,
understanding that
I mean under
neighbors
our,
don't like doing that, but that is always an option.
I meant direction in terms of our ordinance. What
Right.
what can
Strengthening the rules.
yeah.
And in addition to that, it seems like if there are lights that are in violation of code and they were put up when it was a tennis court and still a tennis court as far as I'm concerned,
Sure.
why not send essentially a demand letter to the homeowner to tell them that, number one, the lighting's in violation, take it down. Number two, the property as being used is considered a nuisance, and cease and desist.
Well, the way I would recommend doing it is the way we typically, in most communities, I assume it's the same in the city of Rollywood, how we handle potential or alleged violations of our code is we first try to get compliance. We don't just run down to municipal
Right.
court and file a complaint.
Right.
We send a letter, we point out the regulations we believe are being violated. We ask for compliance. If we can't get compliance, then and we work and negotiate and talk about those things. And then if we can't get compliance, of course, the next step is municipal court. Now, I want to remind council, or maybe not remind, tell you, municipal court can't get compliance. They can't enjoin the activity. All they can do is issue a citation, and if they plead no contest and pay the fine, that doesn't prevent the operation of the activity from continuing on. So, or if they have a trial and it's determined they didn't violate it, then they're not going to be fined. So that they have a right to trial by jury.
Okay.
Is there no avenue for injunctive relief?
I don't believe so. I'll have to double check the statutes. My recollection is the avenue for injunctive relief is related only to health and safety regulations.
Okay. Well, I would make.
But I will definitely, verify.
Go ahead.
I was just going to make a motion, but if you'd rather do it yourself, that's
Go
your
ahead.
item.
Move off of this, I've got one quick question.
Okay.
So we are, as stated earlier, we're going back into our code and cleaning it up to address sport courts, which would, I believe, be an umbrella term that would encompass all of this, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's all.
So my motion would be that we asked our city attorney to send an enforcement letter seeking compliance based on the lighting and the noise issue. The lighting being in violation of existing code and the noise being a nuisance in violation of our noise ordinances. And then secondly, that we ask the city attorney to come up with some proposed ordinances modeled after Park City or Centennial, specifically suggesting ones that might be effective here, such as the on-site parking requirement or prohibiting pickleball within certain hours of the day.
To include but not limited to just those cities, right? To include
Right,
those. but-
exactly. Yeah, to include those. Those are the two I found researching as well, but I'm sure there's lots more. But other cities that have models that have been effective and make recommendations.
We don't
for
want to
us.
recreate the wheel if the
Exactly.
wheel's been created.
Okay, so you have a motion, council, to instruct the city attorney to
And staff.
to
But before you vote, Miss Wilson has
Yeah.
been raising her hand, and I'd like to have a little
I will-
chat if you
I'm
don't
gonna
mind.
I'm gonna take these motions and then we're gonna open it back up for discussion like we always do. Trying to restate the motion. Motion to instruct the city attorney to work with staff to send a letter to seek compliance with the existing codes, and a separate memo from the city attorney to offer suggestions based on what we've discussed. Do you have that motion? Is there a second?
There's a second if we have the additional code provisions back at the next council meeting.
Yeah, we'll bring all that back.
Okay, great.
And is that your second?
Second.
Conditional second. You have a motion by Mr. Glasheen and a second by Ms. Brown. I will now open this up for discussion and recognize Ms. Wilson. Step right up.
Thank you, Ellen Wilson. When you're talking about parking, just at his place, there's so many ways to get around that, including parking in front of my house, my across the neighbor house, and his house. You know, and he could tell his client not to park in front of his house, and then I don't know what. It's just something to consider, that you have to really be looking carefully at everything you do so it can't be gotten around. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Recognize Mr. Meakin.
You're muted, Mr. Meakin.
I know, sorry. I think this can be handled tomorrow morning. Can we just ask that the police show up at 6:30 with a decibel meter and see if it's over 60 decibels? And if so, it violates 18.54 B8. And that can be a violation every single day they do it. And you don't need injunctive relief. It just piles up. I think we're leaning way too far away from the Harris family. I mean, their property value has tanked over this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meakin.
Well, and that was one question I did have, is whether we have, I think we do need to send someone there to measure the noise levels, and do it several different places, including at the property line of the Harris property.
Okay, what's
thank
the noise code provision he referenced? Did somebody catch that?
It is,
It's
1854 B8.
The specific section states, the continued operation of any device such that the noise level exceeds 60 decibels on the A-band level is measured by a sound level meter at the common boundary of the adjacent property.
Okay.
Define device.
Right. I don't want to get into all the
All right. Which is,
possible issues that lawyers will create based on languages and codes, but we will certainly, take
just why don't we ask for a letter.
take affidavits of how annoying this is
Yeah,
under the noise disturbance definition.
I understand what's going on, and we will look at every possible avenue. I've got at least one person on this dais who I think can read that and see enforcement issues.
Just step right up.
Yeah, define continuous.
Right, yes, the whole thing, yes.
Glenn Harris, 3012 Hatley. I would like to make it clear that while that court has been resurfaced to accommodate 4 pickleball courts, it does still have tennis lines painted on it, and it does still have a tennis net. it is still a tennis court. I believe the current lighting rules can be enforced against that with the language as it exists today.
We will, I assure everybody here and these folks that we will look at all appropriate and possible avenues with respect to ensuring that the codes are properly enforced.
Thank you,
Quick
sir.
question while you're up here. I had a thought. Are there multiple games going on at once or just one?
4 games,
4 games at once.
4 players on
Okay.
each court, 16 players total, 4 games.
Thank you.
One other thing that we didn't come out expressly is the school bus comes down that street twice a morning. And so if the school bus is coming from the east end of Hatley, west end going east. So as the school bus comes between these 2 rows of parked cars, it can't see or get out of the way of a car coming up the hill going west on Hatley. Also, the school bus makes a circle on Laura Lane and then has to turn left on Hatley with a car parked on a blind hill that blocks its view until it's in the middle of the street. And so the parking's not only annoying to the neighbors because it's every day for multiple hours, it's also a safety issue, in my opinion. And I don't know if we need to take a look at the curbs along there, but it's a blind hill.
Yeah, it's not just your opinion. I personally, this past weekend when there was the tournament and there was parking on both sides, was driving my car down the hill and had to quickly find a driveway to dart into to prevent myself from being hit head on by a truck going up the hill.
Yeah, that's what's happening daily.
Okay.
It's an accident waiting to happen.
Okay, we're gonna fix it.
Okay. Okay, council, you have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Give Sarah.
I said aye.
I knew you did from afar. There being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Okay, moving off of agenda item number 15, moving back to agenda item number 12, discussion and possible action on a professional service agreement with Univista LLC for information technology services. We have Ms. Wayman who will lay this one out, and I'll recognize Mr. Eccles, I believe.
Sure. So a couple meetings ago, the city council was able to review proposals for IT services for the city of Rollingwood and selected Univista to be the city's new IT provider. Since then, they have been working over the last couple months to take an inventory of what we have here and all of our systems to fine-tune that proposal. And we do have Rob Eccles here today with Univista to discuss that proposal. Here today, we're asking for kind of a 2-part approval. One for kind of the one-time costs that will be associated with the migration from our current IT provider to Univista. They have offered to allow us to do that over a 36-month payoff period so that we do not incur that expense all at once, and then also to approve the actual contracted monthly amount for their services. And I'm going to let Rob speak to this a little bit more, but I know that they're actually still fine-tuning their bid a little bit more. So there's a good chance that we'll actually even be lower than what is in the packet today. So
They can amend all day if they're going to keep going in that direction.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
This, I've also put on the agenda an item that would, to talk about improving our audio-visual sound quality of our meetings. Will this Univista contract include technology that would, I'm sorry, I'm tongue-tied tonight. You know, will it help the technology we use for sound recording and visual recording of our meetings, or allow us to show that board to the public if they're watching on YouTube or Zoom?
And for the sake of efficiency, I'm going to pull up agenda item number 17, discussion and possible action regarding improvements to the sound and video quality of online and recorded city open meetings. And now you can answer that question.
I'll do my best,
Thank you,
and then I'll let Rob speak to that if he has any additional information. But so currently, the setup in here is not supported by our current IT company. So
Okay.
I don't know how that happened at the beginning of the contract, or not a lot of this. A lot of this wasn't thought up, right? There wasn't a need to have the Zoom meetings. We had a different setup in here. We had a different setup on this computer. So it's currently not supported. I would think we may have to do some kind of contract amendment in the future, or work with Univista on that for that support. But that could be something that's part of their proposal. Looks like Rob's thinking about it. So
Come on up, Rob.
yeah, if you wanna-
And we do have both of these in front of us now, but I just a quick historical reminder. The whole Zoom and the way we do our meetings now is a product of the COVID years, and so
Yes.
it's what we're left with. And I recall back in the day, I was not mayor at the time, but we were in a big hurry to figure out how we were going to do it at the time. So it very well may be that we didn't do it quite the way we should have. So I'd be interested to know. And it's also something you don't have to give the full answer tonight. We've sprung this on you. But I would be interested, once we get you fully onboarded, of giving us some ideas on that.
And to put a finer point on it, what I've noticed is the sound quality is not good in those recordings, and the camera doesn't always catch the full dais. And I was watching the Park Commission meeting this week, and two of the commission members were, one was in Ashley's place and one was in this place right here, and you couldn't see either of the commission members. Two of the five that were at that meeting, you couldn't actually see them, and that happens fairly often. So I don't know if it's the way the camera's directed, or whether it's not high enough or it's too high or what, but that was one of the issues. And then the sound quality, especially of the mic at the podium, unless you are used to speaking directly into the mic, it's not going to catch it. And so we lose a lot of our public comment and our professional comment for that. And then this board, no one that's not in this room can see that board. So those are the three things that my concerns were about.
And I do remember that one. It was, you can do this for X dollars, or you can do the one that you can see the other direction for triple X dollars. And so that's how I remember how that came to be. But anyway, Robert,
Hello.
welcome. If you identify yourself.
Robert Eccles, Univista, Mary Massengill, council members, thank you for having me. Councilmember Brown, I think that's a very valid concern. Our most IT companies' stance on it will be, let's go to the professionals to make sure that we get you a solution that's adequate. So one, your infrastructure you've invested money in the infrastructure that you currently have.
Mm-hmm.
So the best suggestion would be, I will poll the other 8 cities that we manage and say, what is our best solution? The most common name you're going to hear with with this idea in mind is Granicus. They're one of the largest companies out there that do it. Unfortunately, with every service piece that you add on, there's always a price tag to it.
Yeah.
So to your point, during that time of tumultuous, let's scramble and get something in that we can actually provide service to the citizens so they can view something, that's what the decisions were made at that point. Our job as a whole for IT is to help you liaison through all that, as well as if we can manage and take over some of that control, we want to help you with that. But I will never come in front of you and say, oh, we got it, it's good, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. And the next thing you know, we are having a conversation where we're not supplying and helping you out with your audio-visual needs. So I would love to bring some examples forward, some current environment setups for the other cities, and then we can talk. We can pull information from our sister cities and give you that information as well to make a more educated decision on what you want to do.
Right.
Second, we want to make sure that the infrastructure that you have invested in is possibly reusable, because what we don't want is, we sometimes see this with vendors where they come in and say, oh, this is great, we just have to gut everything. And unfortunately, that's what you're looking for in IT right now, is we're proposing that some of the things aren't working adequately, so we are gonna have to do a gut and replace. I do not want you to have to go through that with the money you invested, 3 years ago, and the infrastructure you have now. The idea is we will look to improve, to your points, quality, access. Additionally, we'll help you with that.
Well, and then, you know, if we have a new city hall coming online soon, we don't want to waste money, you know, we don't want to put dollars where we can't
Right.
use them. But if improvements can be made, I would hope that we could do interim improvements.
I am in talks right now with our sister city around the corner, and I'm sure you guys know they're doing the same thing. They're building a new
yeah.
dual-purpose building right down the street here, and we have multiple meetings. We've gone through the same things, and the biggest concern there was also audio-video.
Okay.
So part of my job is I'm strategy, I'm budgeting, I'm planning, I'm your account manager, I'm the person that you guys see most often when it comes to moving the city forward. But that also means I get to sit in on those meetings and say, or yes, 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 based on what would be good for your environment as a whole.
Okay.
That's great.
Very good.
Yeah. So let them be the guinea pigs. Figure it out.
There
Just
you go.
remember, they spend a lot more money on stuff than we
There
do.
you go.
So find us the right mix.
We'll
So,
find that nice little, the sweet spot.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, great.
So I believe that was item 17.
Yeah, that was. Any action on 17? Are you good? If you would just keep that on your radar.
Absolutely.
And, bring that back.
Absolutely. So
So I'll move off of agenda item number 17. Now you're recognized on agenda item number 12.
I'll backtrack to number 12. We've done some research. We've actually come on site and done discovery on the environment as a whole. We found that there was some equipment that wasn't even being used. It was actually in the original request for proposal. We've been able to reduce and efficiently use or actually use those numbers to calculate what we're going to do to replace some of the infrastructure that is currently in place. So we've phased it out based on priorities, one being the ability for city staff to even perform their daily functions. That's included in the cost for some network equipment. Infrastructure as a whole, we noticed that, for example, there's 2 switches in the IT closet that's right outside this doorway. One of them is not even being used. So we're not just going to put 2 switches in to replace those 2. We're actually putting in 1 and make sure that everything is wired. If the city grows, or here's the great idea, when this, I'm not sure what your timeline is for the new building, but we want to be able to propose, whatever we propose and put in place, that has to be scalable and movable to your new infrastructure. So that's the plan as well. I think for the most part, the biggest thing we do, another city manager used this term, so I'm going to steal it. We sharpened our pencils, and by doing that on site, we were able to come through and say, hey, we've dropped the cost originally that we were proposing on the proposal about $15,000. To Ashley's point, we are still working on the laptops themselves, but we did a high-end dollar amount that we proposed in the new numbers to basically say it won't exceed this. We're working towards lowering that cost as well. So we don't give up until we get pretty much what we can, the best that we can. So that's our goal. We're here now today to talk about moving forward with those plans, those couple projects in the system as well. And then the one thing about the agreement that we stated, I think I put the wrong date, but what we wanted to do with the agreement is we don't plan on taking over services for the city until your infrastructure is up and running. So that being said, there is no blame game. There is no pointing from your previous company to us from your previous company. All of that is a waste of everyone's time. So in that case, we will allow them to continue with their infrastructure, and when we're ready to go and just flip the switch, then we will pursue that. What we're looking for now is we put it in front of you just to take a look at it, and then we would accept the sign off, but billing would not start until the infrastructure is in place and the projects are completed. Phase projects look at a total of there's about 5 phases. Questions?
Thank you, Robert. Any questions for Robert? Ms. Wayman, what action would you like to see from council this evening?
So at this time, it's a bit of a twofold approach. So we would like approval to go forward with the 36 months of payments towards the one-time costs of the migration and equipment costs. And then we would also like the authorization to enter into an agreement with Univista for our comprehensive information technology services. As proposed here in the packet, with the understanding that if they were to find a lower price, which we are confident they'll be able to do to some extent, that we would just, that's a not to exceed amount, but we would be making sure that we're lowering that value if we can.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
One, how does this compare to the original proposal that we got when we hired them? That's one question.
It's about $15,000 less
Okay,
right now than
great.
their original proposal.
Other question is, have you calculated the interest rate on the 36-year option? 36-month payout option?
I have not.
Okay.
We can
Do you-
work on that.
Do you know what it
Yeah.
is?
I do not off the top of my head.
I can do a present value analysis on it in about 30 seconds. Well, about 3 minutes probably.
Okay.
But, and then the other question is, why do you want to have them basically loan us the money for it instead of just paying for it?
That's an option. It's going to be the total cost that they're proposing for the one time is. Let me just confirm that I have this right. It's going to be $115,000, and so that another option would be to bring forward that and approve that as a one-time expense and do a budget amendment if that's the
What did we budget? How did we budget it? Do you remember?
We have only budgeted for what we would consider the, monthly costs for 12 months for the IT services. We did not budget for any of the additional. And now, that was even before we had, received all the proposals. So it wasn't that we didn't think about it. It wasn't on the table at that time. So we've budgeted enough to cover, actually, what we have currently budgeted between the city or the admin side and the police department side is enough to cover the monthly costs plus the monthly breakup of this total $115,000. So we have enough money.
That was what I remember.
Right.
Like, I think the answer to your question, and I agree with the cost of money concern. I think we knew that there was going to be some migration cost, but we felt confident we could cover that if we financed it. So I think that's where we were on that question, knowing that we could cover it under existing budgeting.
How much are the monthly payments?
$3,769.
If I had my old HP 12C, it'd be great, but now everything's online.
I enjoy watching you under pressure. You promised in 3 minutes you could have this done.
We have the TikTok.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you. I had breakfast in Santa Fe, lunch in Lubbock, and then flew here, so I'm a little
You
slow.
didn't- You didn't caveat your math.
You got it.
It was like 11.
First you said 30 seconds.
All right,
then
Phil.
3 minutes.
See, I did it using resource management here. Phil's got it.
36 months.
Yeah, 3769 a month.
36 months and
That,
up 115,000.
Yeah.
So, once again, I'm wrestling with this MBA, but it looks like it's about 11.74% interest. So that's kind of a high interest rate.
Yeah, I'm getting close.
I'm also happy to. So, a couple of options. One, I think we could, if 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 we could, we could go ahead and do you could do part of this if you wanted to, and then we could bring back the other piece for consideration.
I don't know that even at this time, I'm not sure, because we won't be starting the actual information technology services this next month or anything, because that's not going to happen until the full migration is in. So I don't know that we need to act on that. That's the $47.40 per month. And then I guess it would just depend on what Univista needs from us before they, begin ordering equipment. What kind of commitment?
So we only offer the lease option because I think it was an RFP, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because generally, as you guys know, cities cut checks. There's no, put it on a card. So that being said, what the general process is that we will do a prepayment over matching the Texas rules, Texas code. I think it's prepayments are over 10,000. So if the hardware software for each individual project does not exceed 10,000, we didn't even ask for prepayment. We know that there's going to be a check cut anyway, eventually. And then the labor portion of every project does not go to, you don't see that bill until the project is completed, unless we phase bill it. Unless we know that project is going to go 4 months, then maybe we'd say, okay, 2 months in, we send a partial bill, and then we do the rest of it. The reason why we don't do prepayments on labor is because if I, quote, tell you, let's do simple math. I say my project's going to take 10 hours and I do it in 3, I'm going to bill you 3. I'm not going to bill you 10. So that's a good thing, because then I get to come back in front of you and I get to say, hey, guess what? We said it was 41,000 and we came at 30. So if you're looking at doing it like that, I would say we just take each phase, we map them out, and then we say we're starting phase 1. The only exception is, I think, when we do the SharePoint migration, we have to do the laptops at the same time, or you guys are not going to have access to some of that data. So they're going to be, those two projects will be right side by side. Then, to your point, we would start the agreement once the infrastructure is actually in place and we can support it.
So I've calculated about 10.6% interest. So it's just kind of high. I mean, because can't we do like what do they call them? Notes, revenue notes.
Could I
do
mean
some
we
other
could?
financing,
I
yeah.
think we'd save the trouble on that, and we would if you wanted to pay money on the barrel, I would just say dip into the reserves. I mean, we're at 6-month reserve now. That's how we budgeted it. Next budget, we weren't going to have to budget any additional reserves, and so you could just dip into reserves now, and then we would get back up to 6 months next budget cycle. I mean, and
I
then
just don't like paying 10.7% interest.
I understand.
Sure.
I do understand that,
We're
and I don't
we're
disagree.
close. Yeah.
I don't like dipping into reserves. But they're also there for this sort of. I mean, it's a one-time thing too. So
And we've been successfully building them. so-
we have.
Okay. Well, that'd be my preference.
Straw poll, is that council's
Mine
preference?
as well.
Mine's
Alex?
probably to just go with what we've already discussed, which is the proposal in front of us.
There's an option though to either pay cash or pay it out over 36 months
Oh,
at
I would do the 36, yeah.
10.7% interest.
We'll just straw poll, that's
Sure,
fine.
no, I want to make sure
That's
we're
right.
all speaking the same language.
Ms.
I
Brown?
can go either way. If it's kind of nice to have the money in your pocket, if something goes wrong over that 36 minutes, you're paying interest to do that, so I can go either way.
I kind of can too. All right, let's vote, and then actually, we don't have anything to vote on. So
Phil will lend you the money at 10%.
Well, I think the option is, you could do one without the 36-month payment schedule in an amount not to exceed, we've got the total. So You can, we've got the
Yeah, so
data
would I.
to do it either way.
Right. You could authorize in an amount not to exceed the 115,981. So you could say 116,000.
Would that be, and I thought I heard you say we could do a pay-as-you-go on the 115,000.
We do phased billing.
Phased,
So-
we do a phased payment. Is that what you're talking about, Mr. Glasheen?
I was just saying either pay without interest expense or incur the 10% interest expense, and that's a per year expense. So you're paying about 20,000 plus in interest. A bank could lend you the money at 6%, but this is just a 10.7% rate or something. Or Phil calculated at 11.
I calculated it out to be 11
But
3/4%.
how long-
But it's not that big of a deal, really. We're talking about $20,000, and I don't feel really strongly about it. Don't need to create a bunch of work for anybody. If you guys, as mayor and administrator, want to do that, I just wanted everyone to be aware of what our interest rate was that we're paying.
No, I appreciate that. If y'all tie up, I'm gonna just vote for whoever makes the first motion.
Well,
But
if
let me ask this question, because I think we may be onto something with the phased billing. So explain how that would work, because what we could do is just have you do the phased, just approve the whole amount, have you do phased billing. So we pay as you go, as Mr. Glasheen says, and then we kind of kick the can down the road. And then when we run short in that budget line item, then we come back and say, okay, it's time to make this decision. But then we're paying as we go,
That's fine. There's no interest expense.
and then there's no interest expense.
That's fine.
Would that work?
Absolutely. That's typically the way that it's done.
Okay.
We wanted to offer that because I believe that's how your current IT company does their billing, right? Everything is under one. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know how to make the motion that I just said, but
Make a
I can
motion.
make the motion.
Go ahead.
go for it.
I move we approve authorizing the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Univista LLC for, number one, PC and network equipment replacements, SharePoint and Azure migration, Microsoft Government Cloud and telephones on a phased, with payment not to exceed $115,000 billed to the city on a phased basis as those services are provided. And number two, that we authorize the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Univista LLC for comprehensive information technology services at a price of $4,740 a month.
Excellent job. You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion by Ms. Brown, a second by Mr. McDuffie. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Ooh, she was Johnny on the spot on that one. She was ready to go.
I didn't mute myself.
I know. I saw it. I saw it coming. There being 5 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, council. Thank you. Happy to have you officially on board.
Appreciate it.
With that, we'll move off agenda item number 12 on to agenda item number 13, report from staff on the status of the ATS Control Network Survey Project. I believe this was placed on the agenda by Ms. Brown, but I'll recognize Ms. Wayman for the update.
Sure. So unfortunately, you'll notice some things got added to the packet a little bit later. We thought ATS was going to be able to be here tonight. When we reached out to them on the status of this, they were just almost done and kind of tried to speed through it at the end to get us some additional information for this meeting. But unfortunately, they were not able to be here tonight. But they have completed all of the field work, and they are just in the final phases of getting us something to present to City Council. So I believe some of the information in the packet already shows a lot of the calculations that have been done on all of the manholes, but it's just not quite in a presentable format. So we expect to bring this back next month at City Council meeting.
Okay, and how quickly can we be using this?
That's a great question for ATS. I hope that.
I think immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
good. Well, that's what I was hoping to hear that information and know where we were on it and how quickly we can get it in the field. And I really like the manhole cover photo.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you, council. Thank you, Ms. Wayman. Moving off agenda item number 13 on to agenda item number 14. Discussion and possible action to clarify the policy for leasing fields 3, 4, and 5 and fields 1 and 2 to I-9 Sports. It's Mr. Glasheen's agenda item. I'll recognize Mr. Glasheen.
So when we brought this up at the last council meeting, the idea was to ask I-9 Sports to use Field 1 and 2 if they could conduct their activities there instead of 3, 4, and 5, because the rest of the public can't really use 1 and 2, and it seems like a bad idea to have I-9 on Fields 3, 4, and 5, and Fields 1 and 2 aren't being used. And so people that go up there to play with their dogs and on 3, 4, and 5 find that it's leased out to I-9 and 1 and 2 are empty, and that's a little frustrating. And so that was the suggestion, that we ask them to use those if they can. And I guess there was some ambiguity about whether that meant that city administration had any discretion at all, and apparently since we voted on that issue, I-9 had apparently scheduled a camp that they intended to cancel and forgot to take it off their website, and people had signed up for it, and so because they had made a mistake, they contacted Ashley on very short notice and wanted to use Fields 3, 4, and 5, and of course everyone wanted to accommodate them because it was a mistake and they were in a bind, and that's not a problem to accommodate them, I thought, and so we apparently did accommodate them, which is a good thing. And then I think there was a request that in the future that if I-9 wanted to use Fields 3, 4, and 5 or any use of fields, they needed to give you some more notice than a couple of days. So how much notice is it that you asked them to give?
Well, I think part of that depends on whether, and one of the situations that came up last month, after the motion and the discussion here, we were under the impression that they were not to be using 3, 4, and 5, only 1 and 2. And when they submitted their application for use, 1 and 2 were already being used by softball, baseball. So there was no, those actually weren't open. And so we weren't clear that there was some room there. We thought that needed to come to council. And so if that's something that in the future is going to need to come to council, we'd like to know, from them a couple months heads up so we can get it on an agenda and bring that to you. But if it's something that, if it's a matter of the fields are already in use and they can use 3, 4, and 5, I think we're okay with a month or so like we had from them in the past.
And then one of the Park Commission members, Nicole Marici, brought it up at the Park Commission meeting and was upset that we had had a policy change without talking to Park Commission about it, and then Park Commission and my understanding it was that it was just that as a matter of a preference that if they could use 1 and 2, then they should, and that didn't seem to be a major policy change. But it came up at Park Commission, and they had a long discussion about it, and basically agreed that it was appropriate. I think it was Nicole was the only one opposed, but they voted and agreed that it was appropriate to have I-9 use 1 and 2 if they're available. And I don't know that there was a specific vote on it, but there was some discussion where they would like I-9, would like us to accommodate I-9 if they infrequently needed to use Fields 3, 4, and 5. I think there were a couple of events a year that were big enough, but they weren't like a regular weekly function. In fact, you were there. Did I state that correctly?
Yes, I think so. And there was also some discussion around, like their camps right now are 1 hour a week. And there was discussion around, well, what about the summer camps that are, 3 hours a day for a week or 2 at a time? And we would just like clarity so that way we understand that whatever the situation comes up, does it need to come before council or park commission, or do we have the latitude to approve that?
And so we just need to have a discussion about that here. And I'm happy for them any sports group to rent out Fields 1 and 2 because those aren't really usable for any other purpose other than sports games. I don't like the idea of renting out Fields 3, 4, and 5, especially when it's $50 an hour rental. That's something that the folks that use those fields, if there's 10 people up there, I'm sure they would. $50 an hour isn't worth it to give up our fields, which is the only place people can take their dogs on here. So that's just my feeling about it, is that if they need to use 3, 4, and 5 infrequently, that they need to ask permission from you ahead of time. And if it's infrequent, I don't have a problem with it, but I don't know how you state that in a clear policy, or whether we need to have a more black and white rule. And I know other people have feelings about this, so I'll be quiet and listen.
Thank you, Councilman. Council?
Well, I'll weigh in on the fact that these past 2 weeks, 1 and 2 were vacant while 3, 4, and 5 was being used for that camp. There was, on the second occasion, there was one guy doing batting practice on number 2. And the batting cages weren't being used, so there was that possibility. And that gets to the issue, which is, I think, you know, Nicole's demonstrated before that the areas on 1 and 2 are actually larger than the area of 3, 4, and 5. And I've out there, as everyone knows, probably more than most, and have seen the sports camps on 1 and 2, and 1 and 2 has been more than adequate for running those sports camps. And so I would lean toward just making it clear that 1 and 2 are available and 3, 4, and 5 aren't, because I think the fuzzy lines just lead to more contentious possibilities and that type of thing. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion hasn't changed since last time we brought this. I'm surprised it's back up again, but yeah, I think that my feeling is that they don't use it that often. That, I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, Ashley, how many times do you remember they?
I believe it's spring break and maybe summer that they do
The big
morning camps that are at least a week at a time, 3 hours a day in the mornings. And then currently they're doing 1 hour a week every Tuesday in November and the 1st of December. So I think it's, you know.
I guess that's a little more than I thought, but yeah, I still feel like we should be able to. Because the other thing is, like, I mean, I know, like, Phil, like, mentioned that he's seen them out there using the other fields and it works for the sports. And that was kind of my question I had, like, because I could feel like maybe sometimes it wouldn't be, like, a good, with all the dirt kind of the way it is, that it might be easier to just have a big open field to run the camp. That was my other thought about it. So I'm kind of still on the side of letting them use it.
Okay. Mr. Robinson?
I mean, I don't want to get into a fight with I-9. I've always had very cordial discussions with Justin of I-9. I've never had a contentious discussion with him on any of this. But, you know, there are other factors that we need to look at, such as placing tents and putting out tent stakes, which may or may not have punctured irrigation lines in the past and that type of thing. So there are issues with I-9 that, you know, we need to kind of look at beyond this, and that's another side discussion. Maybe we'll look at it some future date. But I do think it's reasonable to restrict them to fields 1 and 2, particularly because typically they're doing their camps because they are sport camps, and they do prefer to accommodate baseball and softball. So they're only really doing them when baseball and softball are not terribly active. And therefore, fields 1 and 2 are going to be vacant during those times, for the most part, or completely vacant. And therefore, I think it's a reasonable request that they grant 1 and 2 for those reasons.
I have a question. When do they typically want to use 3, 4, and 5? Is that,
Well, they do a summer camp, then they do camps over the Christmas breaks, like when there's.
I've seen those, but I've seen those on fields 1 and 2.
Right.
So that's, my question is, how often do they want to rent 3, 4, and 5 versus being able to use 1 and 2? I mean, how often does this conflict arise on 3, 4, and 5? I guess is another way to.
I'd say they our recent policy, since I think maybe a year ago when the park commission discussed this, was that if 1 and 2 are available, we try to get them down to those fields. If they have a reason why they need 3, 4, and 5, sometimes they've cited having too many kids or a certain type of sport that is not conducive to having bases. They've requested 3, 4, and 5. The only issue this last time was that 1 and 2 were supposed to be being used by softball and baseball, and so that's why they weren't able to use 1 and 2. We believe now that softball and baseball is over, so that for the rest of their next 2 or 3 camps that they have in the next coming weeks, they should be on 1 and 2, and we've notified them of that. But that's what we just need to know. Is it a never get to use 3, 4, and 5, or is it a don't get to use 3, 4, and 5 if 1 and 2 are open, and then if those are otherwise booked by softball or baseball, then we can authorize that. We just need to know what we can authorize from staff, so that we can avoid conflicts.
I think the latter. I mean, I understand the problem with having a hard and fast, with having a loose rule with discretion is that it leads to conflict or misunderstandings or upset. But I think that you can handle it, and I think that you can use discretion to. I don't want to make things so difficult for I-9 that we are inflexible.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think the preference should be we use 1 and 2, and then you use your discretion to try to hold that. Unless you would prefer a black and white rule. She might.
Yeah, I just if it's going to be an issue where if it's if a 3-hour camp matters over a 1-hour camp, good information to know. We just want to make sure we're trying to keep everyone happy and satisfy the different uses of the park. And they're generally amenable when we ask them to go to 1 and 2 when they're open. But there have been times when they've said for their larger camps, maybe in the summer or over spring break, that they have too many kids and it makes more sense for them to use that other field. So I like to be able to if that's a reasonable request, I would like to be able to grant it, but not if it's later doesn't appear to be reasonable, or there are others that think they should be on 1 and 2. So we just want to make everybody happy. So,
Ms. Hudson, you're recognized.
Thank you. There was a point brought up in the written comments that were submitted about the lease, or not the lease, the deed, whatever, saying that we are supposed to give priority to youth sports. And I just wanted to point out that I-9 is not youth sports. I-9 is a commercial use of our park, as opposed to the softball and baseball leagues, which are youth sports. So that, having the 3, 4, and 5 available for residents to use is a valuable use of our park. And I-9 is not does not have a superior claim on the use of those fields.
I would agree with you on the superior point. I did not plan on commenting, but when my 7-year-old was playing I-9 flag football, I did consider that youth sports. So,
but the point is,
well, but the camps, when you're paying for a camp, that's not youth sports. That's a commercial use. That's like having an exercise group up there using it.
And we can agree to disagree, but
yeah, it just happens to cater to children instead of adults, but it's still commercial use of the park. So
what if we had a different pricing structure for 3, 4, and 5 and let them use them but make them pay more? Because $50 an hour isn't much if they're having so many kids that they can't keep them on 1 and 2. I mean, what is that, 100 kids? And what are those kids paying? If it's $20 a piece, that's $2,000, and we're getting $50 an hour. That just doesn't seem like the right incentives are in place. Maybe we could just, accommodate them, but with different incentives.
back to the point where I'm up there, I see how many kids they've got. They may have 100 kids sign up for their summer camp. And the reason they might have 100 kids sign up for the summer camp is because parents want the option to use it as a cheap alternative to daycare and that type of thing. And what happens is during the summer camps, they may have a lot of people who sign up and are willing to pay, but then on the hot days, their kids aren't out there. And what I've seen is, 30 kids, I'm guessing, maybe 40, that type of thing. There aren't that many children. So, and that's why 1 and 2 has always been more than adequate to serve those needs. And I think the park is an amenity. It can be made available to residents. And I do think that just making a clear distinction and having it so that, what's worked with baseball and softball is to make very clear lines that if there's an organized game or practice on 3, 4, and 5, absolutely no other activities happen out there on 3, 4, and 5. And that has removed the conflicts that were always happening on 3, 4, and 5. And so, there are accommodations. I think when you can make clear, distinct lines, then it just prevents the conflict. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, council. Is there any action to be taken on this agenda item? Do we have action? Calling once. Calling.
I'll move that we restrict I-9 to fields 1 and 2.
You have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, hearing none, we will move off of agenda item number 14 and move on to agenda item number 16, discussion and possible action on the CRC survey results and process for making results available to the public.
Could I make another motion on that last?
Yes, I will.
My motion would be.
Oh, hold
that-
on,
I'm sorry.
I'm backing up. I withdraw item number 16. We're back on agenda item number 14.
My motion would be that we clarify the policy that we adopted last council meeting by saying that I-9 is restricted to fields 1 and 2, but if they need relief from that restriction for an event, that they can ask the council to give them permission for an event. And certainly they know these things in advance enough that they could ask us when they need it and could come and tell us why they need it.
I've heard the motion. You have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Glasheen, a second by Mr. McDuffie. Is there further discussion? Can't imagine that there is. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no.
No.
There being 4 ayes, 1 nay, motion carries. Thank you, council. Moving on to agenda item number 16, discussion and possible action on the CRCRC. I just stumble every time. On the CRCRC survey results and process for making results available to the public. Believe this is Mr. McDuffie's item. Mr. McDuffie.
It's not. I think this was city staff.
I've been failed by staff.
Or perhaps it's.
Do I have
I think we give a standing slot to Mr. Bench.
I will, yes, I will recognize Ms. Wayman to lay out this motion, or this agenda item.
Mr. Bench is here from the CRCRC. They met this week and were able to present some of their survey results, and I believe we have added those to the packet today here. And Mr. Bench would like to speak about release of results to the public and how to go about that.
Oh, I did say. I did.
Okay. That's right.
Now I do remember.
I wasn't going to hear about it later.
I wasn't going to say anything, but
she was going to keep that for me.
All right.
All right.
So
It's
I
clarified.
will tee this up.
Okay, great.
There's been some concern on how we release the results and the possibility that it might cause some hard feelings and conflicts between some neighbors. and that type of thing. And so we're looking to both honor the results, release the results, and hopefully keep peace in the neighborhood. And so I did request that we take a look at this as a council and try to find out, you know, how we might do that. And Mr. Bench is here to speak on behalf of what he believes in.
Thank you, Mr. McDuffie, and I will recognize Mr. Bench. I'll just say we're really moving at a great clip, Dave. So keep it short, but I'll recommend. Well, I'll hear what you have to say, but this sounds like an easy one to solve with a simple redaction of identifying information. I'll just leave that out there hanging and recognize Mr. Bench.
David Bench, one Randolph, and redaction is actually the word I was looking for.
Perfect.
Yes. The CRCRC met last evening. We went through the survey results. This item did come up, and we, among ourselves, decided that we would X out any identification of any address or person or whatever. And really, if you go through the results, there aren't many of them. And the ones that are out there are really not, they're not that volatile. It's not that bad. People were really quite well behaved as far as their comments were, even if they were in strong disagreement with what we were being suggested. So
I think it was a testament to the quality of the survey.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's a great point. But to clarify that, it'll still be the full breadth of the responses. It would just be a redaction of the identifying information.
That's right. We'll keep the comments in there, but you won't be able to tell, you know, what they're directed at. You know, they're
Perfect.
okay.
Council, any questions for Mr. Bench?
So
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so in terms of releasing the results, I mean, this is there's a presentation that has some information, and you're just saying
Yes.
that the comments will be like the next
Yeah,
piece.
the way that the information has come to us is a raw data set that we needed to break it apart and understand, you know, the comments themselves and the string that ran through them all. Bowie had provided the presentation that you have in your packet, and it's just kind of an overview of how many, you know, the questions that were asked and what the yes/no answers were to them. They don't include any comments at all. We'll get to that at that point, you know, at some point. And the question is, should we be releasing that stuff early? I vote no. I'd rather we don't release it so early because we want to make sure that we've got everything redacted before it gets out into the public view. That's all. We're just trying not to insult or hurt anybody.
And for process, Ms. Wayman, suggestions on where it's ultimately published?
The CRCRC has a website where other working documents have been posted in the past, so I think that'd be a good place to post it.
Okay. All right. Awesome.
Can I ask you all a couple of questions?
Sure.
Well, I'm up here, it's real quick. First off, you know, we are moving along as quickly as we can on this, and we're very pleased with the results of the survey. They're quite good. The comments are super. The question is, whenever we bring a recommendation to you, what is the level of detail that City Council, and for that matter, even Planning and Zoning, is looking for? Is it, you know, kind of a general recognition that there's a need out there that needs to be addressed, and we just say that? Or do you want more specifics of exactly how we would address those kinds of things? Like, you know, what kind of words? Have you all had a thought on that? And if so,
Ms. Brown?
Bounce that back.
Well, my thought on that is that this survey in some ways was different than the comprehensive plan survey. It was more, the questions in the comprehensive plan were more generalized. Here, where the survey has asked specifics, for example, on the height issue, I think I would like to see the CRCRC come back with a recommended policy based on the level of detail that's in the question, matched to the level of detail in the survey. And so that may vary a little bit based, you know, by subject matter, but I think it would be That would be my recommendation,
Okay.
is that you match the level of detail to the detail that's in the survey.
Okay, that's fair, that's a fair answer. Okay.
And I think in the commercial survey, we had a little bit of a problem then when it came to writing the code revisions, because not everything that the commercial committee recommended could just easily fit into the code, and I think it's better if you're more mindful of the affected code provisions while you address that, and that may
Exactly.
require participation of the code consultant in that part of your process, and we might want, and I'd like to hear what our city administrator thinks about that.
Sure, I think so. I think that's a great point. It's helpful to have someone who's written those kind of codes and stuff be there for those discussions, just to kind of guide it in a way and make the committee aware when there are things that may be difficult to code or things they may want to go into more detail on. And so I think
better ways to describe what you're trying to do in the code.
right, exactly. And so I think when y'all get closer to that point, and it will, it will cost a little bit of money, and I believe we've already, reached our 8,000 for the survey, but I don't think the city council would have an issue with that, because I think in the long run, it's going to save us money on the drafting of the code later.
I think we're going to be ready pretty soon to try to introduce someone else into the process so that we can be sure that we're not, I guess, barking up the wrong tree, really, right? Can we actually do this? So I will communicate, well, I'll send a
That'd
note to you.
Yes, that'd be great.
It'd be
And we
great,
can-
okay,
we
very
can
good.
work on
And
that.
then we'll need an agenda item on next council and maybe a proposal from the code writers. Is that Charlie's team?
Okay.
And associates?
Yeah.
Charlie's, and associates.
Yes,
If
and
they're-
associates.
yeah.
Emphasis on associates. Mhm.
And then I just have one more question, and this is a toughie because, and I'm asking it because I know that people in the committee are asking me, and I don't really have a great answer for it. But whenever we got into this business, probably better than a year ago altogether, I think the conventional wisdom was that with COVID, we were coming off of COVID, and with interest rates going up, that the pace of applications for building permits was slowing down, and that we would actually see housing starts slow down here. I don't think that's true. I think that it hasn't worked out that way. I think we're actually starting to see things pick up probably quickly, and so we're trying to move quickly to accommodate that if there are going to be any changes recommended, and I think there's a good chance that there will be. So my question to you is there anything that can be done legally, or should it just, for whatever reason, to slow down the process, to let us catch up?
Okay, we're not posted for something that
Okay.
detailed.
Right,
And-
okay.
And you've gotten off into
Sure.
territory that I have concern that citizens might feel like we've covered more territory than we're posted
Gotcha.
for. Happy to have that discussion with you when it's posted for that discussion, so.
Expect it next meeting. Thank you.
You got it.
Well, and I may go off into the weeds too, but I'm just wondering when we have recommendations or proposals or something like that, other than those being posted on the city council agenda, is that something we can put up on the CRCRC's part of the website to basically inform our citizenry of what's being considered to spur those kind of conversations? And
I can shoehorn that one into this. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think that would, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
And I think that CRCRC website is the right landing spot for that, in my opinion.
I agree. I'd just like to make that recommendation that that's how we continue to communicate with.
We're all about transparency.
Right.
Yeah.
I promise.
Well, I guess we could put a discussion of some kind of moratorium on next council meeting's agenda, but I used that word once and a lot of people got pretty excited about it. It didn't go well.
I
Let me
wouldn't
just
use
say
that. I kind of like suspension. You know.
That's why I called stop to that discussion.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Dave, as
Oh,
always. Thanks for
One
your
more
service.
thing. I just want, Shanti gets up here and thanks City Council and various members of the government here for a number of things. And I just want to recognize Shanti for the incredible, superhuman work that she had done in helping us get these door hangers out there. She was really huge in being able to get the kind of response that we got. So thanks so much. For
Thank
her.
you, Shanti.
And thanks to y'all.
Team effort. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you. Okay, moving off of agenda item number 16, moving on to, we have already done 17, moving on to agenda number 18. Report from staff on the status of legal action to trademark the Rollingwood logos. And believe this is Ms. Brown's, but I'll recognize Ms. Wayman to give that update.
We worked with legal to submit our applications for the trademarks of both the R-Leaf and the city logo, as well as the city seal. All 3 applications were submitted in April of this year, along with checks. We have been informed by the Secretary of State's office that they are still awaiting legal review. So,
How long does that last?
Great
What's
question.
typical there?
If it's anything like their election night returns, it could take forever.
Honestly, everything's really slow at the federal level right now.
This is state level.
Oh, well, I don't know what's going on at the state level then. I don't know why it's taken so long.
In the past, when I've tried to
This
get
is-
something trademarked, it took about a year.
I'm also wondering too, because we submitted it through applications and through the mail, as that was the direction at the time. And then when I reached out to check on the status, they gave me a login to some new portal. And so it's still not showing anything in that portal, but I'm wondering if they were switching systems or something and we got in with the old process and maybe there's a new process. And so I don't know. They didn't give me any more information other than
Okay.
it's still in the queue.
I had thought that we were gonna have legal counsel assist on that, but.
Well, we did.
They did.
We
They
did.
did.
I mean, we
Okay.
did everything to get it
Mhm.
to the Secretary of State, and now it's in their hands. We don't have any control after that.
Right.
Okay,
They prepared the applications.
Yeah,
All right.
For
we
us.
we did all of that very quickly.
and so they don't give any kind of time frame on when they may respond, or if we've properly submitted.
Right, we don't have anything. There's a key, for when they do eventually post it, it gives you the different things they could say for how your application was, and some of them are, approved or approved with comments or, rejected or whatever. So they've given what they will tell us eventually, but we have no insight into how our applications look right now. So
And it won't make you happy or help you, but we have another client that we assisted with the same thing, and they did it in like March, February, and they still haven't heard anything yet either.
Okay, all right. Well, just let's keep it updated.
sure.
My thought is, let's just bring this back, keep bringing it back till we know that it's been done.
Yeah, Shanti Jaykumar, 3309 Prackles Drive. This is a question. Why did the company that created the logo for us, did they not have it in the contract that they should deliver? I mean, this is a honest question because it's driven me nuts to see that being used illegally, I would say, by so many different entities. And it appears to be coming from City Hall when it's not. And I've had it up till here on that one. So I would like to go back to the drawing board and see what's in our contract with that company. I don't know who did it. Nudge? I don't know. No, not Nudge. Somebody.
Yeah.
One of those fancy names, whatever. This means a lot to the community, to the city, as to how that symbol, we spent a lot of money, 30, 40, 50,000, I don't know how much. And it's just ridiculous that we cannot have it just for the exclusive use of the community, coming from City Hall. Something doesn't jive. Why we didn't do it right off the bat, or why we can't go back there and tell them. Maybe they have a way of figuring it out.
It's not.
I don't know.
It's not typical of graphic artists to do trademark or copyright actions. That's not typical at all. And we do have rights to that. The attorney could tell you better than I could, but we have common law rights which can be enforced, and we could send cease and desist letters to people who use our logos and designs inappropriately or in some way that's misleading. But if we go through this statutory copyright or trademark or process, we have stronger rights, and that's what we're trying to do. But in any case, even if we do get this statutory copyright or trademark, we still have to enforce it. No one enforces it for us. So we would still have to have our attorney send cease and desist letters, or as it came up once before, when there was some question about somebody using it, we voted to ask the mayor to nicely ask them to stop using it, and which I'm sure he loved.
You instructed me to do that.
Yeah. And,
well, yeah. So a couple of veins from that leaf were removed. That doesn't cut it. Not in my book, anyway. This is high level of, it's for our city.
If there's examples that you would like to request us to enforce our rights on, I think you should bring them specific examples to maybe the administrator. Don't have to put you on the spot here, okay? But you don't mind. You don't mind being on the spot.
I've lived here long enough to know not to be bothered by such things. But I am a stickler for following not just the spirit of the law, but the rule of the law.
Sure.
No matter what, okay? So that's my constant. So I really wish y'all would pull out all the stoppers and get this done, please. I mean,
thank you,
so
Shanta.
it's for everybody's peace of mind.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Wayman? All right, moving off of agenda item number 18, moving on to agenda item number 19, discussion and possible action regarding the role of the Park Commission. This is Mr. Glasheen's item. Recognize Mr. Glasheen.
Thank you. And first of all, let me say that I'm just bringing this up for initial discussion, and I would certainly ask that we not take any action on this item until we also hear from the Park Commission on this issue. And so I think this is a discussion that's going to have to take place over time, and as we understand what the problem is. And when I say there's a problem, what I mean by that is that there's a lot of frustration at the Park Commission about what their role is, and they have asked on several meetings in a row, have raised the question of what their role is, and there's been some frustration because they haven't been able to get some things done, and when they make requests for things to get done, their perception is that City Council doesn't support them. They also have some frustration with maintenance issues because, they were doing walkthroughs, and their perception was that there wasn't follow through on the items that they flagged to be dealt with in the park. And that raises, and then so they quit doing walkthroughs, and actually nobody signed up for any walkthroughs for the last year. And so they stopped doing that. And so there's some frustration on that. And then from my perspective, as I came along on council and started working with Park Commission, I saw maintenance issues in the park that I felt needed to be addressed, such as the lack of irrigation in the park. There's maintenance issues with our irrigation system. We had problems that we weren't using fertilizer or weed control, and then there's some trail deterioration that needs to be addressed. And it's kind of difficult for the Park Commission to deal with that because they can do walkthroughs, and they felt like they were supposed to be interacting with the maintenance department or with our maintenance staff, which is also a problem because really it needs to go through the city administrator. Maintenance staff can't work for each one of us on council, and they can't work for the Park Commission.
Thank you.
And so, I've tried to respect that myself and try to go through. But the truth is that the city administrator needs to administer maintenance, and Park Commission can make recommendations to the city administrator, but we still have to have follow through. And I think a lot of the frustration and difficulty comes from the code of ordinances that establishes the Park Commission and sets forth what the Park Commission is supposed to do, because at the time that was done, back in 1995, is what I'm understanding by looking at the codes, It might have been a different time in terms of where maybe we needed to do more work to develop the park. And I think now we're more at a point where we want to maintain the park. And I'm not sure that we need to be or want to be developing a bunch of things in the park, but we do need to maintain the park. And so I think this was originally written, I think, with the idea of development, and also encompassed some ideas on how the Park Commission would function that haven't worked out. So the first point is, it says the purpose in the beginning of the ordinance, and I've gotten the ordinance attached as part of our packet. It says the purpose of the Park Commission shall be to implement the improvements approved in the City Parks Master Plan. And we have a Parks Master Plan that is approved, and it's got a lot of things in it that City Council doesn't want to do. And it's got some things in it, like it's got a separate dog park to be built, that, you know, back where the parking lot is, north of the fields 3 and 4 and 5. I don't think that's going to happen based on what I've heard of council. But there's other things in that Park Master Plan, quite a few things, some of which is vague, but certainly that's not the purpose of the Park Commission now, as it actually functions, is to implement the Park Master Plan. If it is, I think we need to revise that Park Master Plan, or at least repeal our adoption of it, and not have a Park Master Plan if we don't intend to follow through with it. Perhaps our Park Master Plan should just say the master plan is to maintain what we have and keep it in good condition. But I think that needs to be a discussion that has to be had, and whether that should be the purpose of the Park Commission related to the master plan or some other definition. The other issue is that this ordinance creating the Park Commission talks about the Park Commission keep records of revenues and expenditures associated with the development and upkeep of all city-owned parks, that they shall negotiate with appropriate parties regarding lease agreements, maintenance, and capital improvement contracts, and they shall participate and coordinate fundraising and expenditures, and should provide accounting reports for their funds to the city council. And as it stands, the Park Commission is not, this seems to envision the Park Commission raising money and then using that money, keeping it under their own control and using it for capital improvements and maintenance. And that's simply not how the Park Commission functions. They haven't raised any significant funds in a long, long time. They certainly aren't paying for maintenance of the park. And so I think we need to just revisit that, and I think it, again, is not something we should take any action on at this time, but I just wanted to start a conversation about it, because the same conversation is going to be taking place at the Park Commission, and they're going to have recommendations. I think the Park Commission serves a very important role, and I think that one of their roles is to protect the park from being overdeveloped by maybe overzealous council members. And I certainly appreciate that role. And I could envision an idea where nothing gets really done as far as capital improvements without the Park Commission's approval. But that's also can be somewhat of a confusing issue. And I've encouraged the Park Commission to think about things in terms of, they were talking about projects, and I've encouraged them to think about them in terms of either maintenance or capital improvements and separate those two things, because maintenance seems to be more of a city staff function, and capital improvements might be something that they have a defined responsibility on to, basically protect the park from overzealous development. But to give a perfect example of the problem, if you could show the photograph for us that I've submitted. When I've talked to the Park Commission, and I've tried to help spur some action on some longstanding problems in the park, like the retaining wall that we proposed, that Phil McDuffie and I worked on, and we presented it to council and to RCDC and the Park Commission, and the Park Commission and RCDC approved it, and council did not. And some people on the Park Commission were upset with me because I started talking about that retaining wall with RCDC and council before we talked to them. And, but that's partly because of this. I was not aware of this, what their responsibility was on capital improvements. And so, I'm certainly happy to respect their jurisdiction. But on this issue here, this is an erosion problem that you can see by the pavilion in the lower park. And you can see there's a drip line from the roof that has worn away all the dirt and created basically a dirt step, and that where it's washed out the dirt. This is a problem that the Park Commission told me has been a problem that they've been trying to address for years, is what Lori Mills told me. And so I said, I will work on that and help you get that fixed. So I contacted City Administrator Ashley and Izzy from the Parks Department. She got Izzy involved at the Parks Department to meet us over there, and I invited the members of the Park Commission to go look at it. And one of them did, Victoria Johnson. And we looked at it and came up with a plan to basically take out that dirt shelf and replace it with basically a concrete step down, and then there could be pavers or bricks put in there. And it's a simple project that Izzy believed we could do within city budget, and his staff could do it, and it's very inexpensive solution. The Park Commission's original suggestion from over a year ago was to put in a French drain, and that didn't go anywhere because a French drain's not necessary there and wouldn't really accomplish anything. So what it really needs is some concrete there to catch the roof drip line, and a step down that would make that bench accessible from the sidewalk, and then either some decomposed granite or even pavers in there. So I sent that, we had that little meeting. Park Commission representative was there. Then I sent this over to the chairman of the Park Commission and said, hey, this is the solution we've come up with the city administration. Would you please run it by the rest of the Park Commission? And the answer from the chair was, let me make sure I get this right. The answer was, I'm of the opinion this is a maintenance issue that doesn't require our consent or advice. Okay, that's fine, but I know somebody's going to get mad at me at Park Commission if we go fix this without getting their consent and advice. And so I think we need to maybe help by, avoid these problems by having a clear understanding of what it is that Park Commission, we want them to weigh in on. And I think generally in concept, I'm thinking that maintenance issues, they can flag on their walkthroughs, give to the city administration, but city administration should come up with the solutions to maintenance problems. And any major capital improvements projects should have Park Commission approval, I'm thinking. But I think it's just going to be a discussion we have to have there, and then it'll come back here later.
Thank you, Councilman.
There's no action required at this
Okay.
time.
Any other council members want to add in?
I'll just say, I'm not sure how we get back on the same page here, but I think it's good to have this discussion. When the retaining wall issue was proposed, I suggested that we need to look where that water's going. So, and maybe have a vendor or two come in that specializes in water retention or storage tanks. So Gavin and I met with Innovative Water Solutions, and Mary Elizabeth Kofer from the Park Commission had participated in that, but I haven't heard. I thought we'd get a report back from them, but we've got a lot of people doing this, covering the same territory here, and somehow from my perspective, we on the council can't do everything. What I like that's in the Park Commission ordinance is that the language about they'll advise the city council on park-related matters, conduct hearings, make recommendations, and perform other duties. And I just have this vision that let's take this pavilion issue, identify it, go, here is a solution, have them do the nitty-gritty, look at both sides of it, look at if there's other options, and then make a recommendation back to us. I think that's different from presenting them with a solution.
Mhm.
And so I think we do need, we have a park commission. These people have loved the park for years. We need to ask for their we need to say, here's a problem. We want your recommendation. We want it. We can make these resources available to help you with that, but we want you to do the groundwork. We want you to get public opinion and bring it to us. It doesn't seem that hard to me if we all are working on the same page, which I think we are. Everybody loves the park.
Sure.
Everybody wants the park to look good. Everybody has an idea about that. And I think we just have to make that work, you know.
And I think one reason why it hasn't worked is because of maybe the lack of distinction between maintenance and capital improvements, which is one reason I brought this example up. And the other reason that it's been dysfunctional is because the Park Commission has the perception that they make recommendations and then nothing happens. Like, for example, the retaining wall, they recommended that we do it. It came up here to council and it got killed because we want to turn it into a drainage.
It hasn't been killed.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
has not been
That,
killed.
but I'm telling you their
It is-
perception.
When people say
I'm-
it's been killed, that's incorrect.
I'm telling you their perception, and they used that term
Well,
several times in the
because
last
people were
meeting.
using that language. It was not killed. We
I
wanted a-
didn't make that language up. That came from the Park Commission. I'm just telling you that was their perception. But I understand it wasn't killed. It was shelved or whatever it was. But we're waiting on a report from a drainage engineer. I understand that. I understand that, you know, the drainage engineer looked at it and said, yeah, retaining wall's a good idea. But we're waiting on a report back. And that's fine, I understand that. But I guess my point is that why, you know, I know you're saying it should just work, but it doesn't just work because the Park Commission's perception is that what they recommend doesn't get done. And so they feel powerless and then they stop trying to find solutions to things. That's why they quit signing up for their walkthroughs for a year. And I mean, we've got Park Commission members here, but also I forgot the other point I was going to make, but I'll remember it in a minute. But anyway.
May I be recognized, Mr.
Yes,
Chairman?
ma'am.
Just so it's clear, my view of what the council did with respect to the retaining wall is ask for additional information about dealing with the discharge from the French drain. And that meeting's been had. It was a good meeting. And my understanding is we're waiting on Innovative Water Solutions to come back with a proposal
That is
to
correct.
deal with the French drain and a couple of other options.
That's
My
correct.
recommendation would be we get that proposal, we ask for the input of the Park Commission with respect to those recommendations, and then bring it back to the council. That's what I'm expecting to happen. We have not killed the retaining wall. We have asked for additional information. And I think that's a good project. I just think it lacked, I wanted the additional information. Council got it. We're working on getting it. Same thing here. It's a good recommendation. But it's the difference in presenting it as this is what we need to do versus this is a recommendation. I'd like your input. And once we start doing as the council with whatever with the CRCRC, we haven't told them what the answer is. We've asked them to come to us with the answer. And so it takes that if we're going to give them a task, we've got to give them the authority to do the task. So just like if they don't have the money, but we are asking them to give us the recommendation, then we've got to let them do it and bring the recommendation back. One of the things I think we could do better as a council is just simply take the time, maybe 1 or 2 workshops at the beginning of the year, one among us that says, what are our priorities for this year? And then we're not stepping all over each other. And we ask our committees and boards to do the same thing. Take the time to have a workshop. What are the priorities? And then that way we can sort them out, come to a resolution on it, and go forward, and we're not stepping all over each other. And so it's, to me, I would like to see that on the council level, because I think there's some things we could give more attention to, and give our boards and commissions more authority to do some of the stuff we're trying to do here at this table, when we really want a more comprehensive proposal to come to us. Here's an example. We're spending this time, again, talking about a smaller park project. We need to be figuring out how we're gonna deal with LCRA and a new water supply contract. That's what the five of us up here, in my opinion, that's our highest priority. And we can ask our boards and commissions to bring us recommendations on these other things. But I think if we take a bit of time to talk with each other like we're doing now and go, I think, I can say, I think that's one of our highest priorities. We've now got the water project going. We've gotten some things done. So let's look at MOPAC South expansion project. Some things that we ought to be identifying, so that we're all contributing to the process here. That we're using our time and our effort and our position to do what we ought to be doing, and we're asking our boards and commissions to do the same thing. It's a shame that they feel like we haven't been responsive, and I want to pay attention to that. And so let's go. Let's find a way to fix this.
So, if I could, I appreciate your concern with MOPAC and the water supply, and those are very important issues, but my personal priority is I want to see the park well maintained. I want to see the park commission function well, and to be a happy job where they know what they're supposed to do and that they do it. And I don't have a particular agenda on how that ought to turn out. I think it just needs to be a discussion that we come up with something that works, because what we have right now doesn't work. And that's why I gave a very specific example of that erosion below the pavilion, because this is something the Park Commission has been trying to solve for a long time, well more than a year, and they don't have a way to go get a solution about that. Their way to get a solution is, let's hire a landscape architect. Well, that's not something that we really want to do as a council to fix a simple maintenance problem. And the right way to fix that is to go to have a meeting like with Izzy and Ashley and with Park Commission members and say, hey, what's a good solution for this? And Izzy came up with a suggested solution. I don't think that the Park Commission is going to organically be able to come up with a solution by itself without getting some input and assistance from somebody. And in this case, it's a maintenance issue that Izzy says, yeah, I can handle that. He's a great guy to talk to about solutions for problems. I'm not, I can come up with solutions for problems, but I think you're right. The Park Commission needs to do it, but they need to understand how to go about doing that, whether it's meeting with Izzy, or if we do want them to have a landscape architect that they can consult and get solutions to problems, then we need to talk about that and give them those tools so that they'll have that power, so they can go deal with that themselves. And they'll have to have the authority to spend some money to do that, because right now they don't. And so we need to, either, if we're going to expect them to do these things, we need to give them more clear authority and a path to getting solutions, and that may involve giving them, some tools like a landscape architect they can consult when they need to. But that's something that they're going to have to talk about at the Park Commission, and they're going to have to come up with ways to make their Park Commission be able to solve problems and be more functional in that way. And that's just one idea that I'm throwing out. So I just want to have a discussion here. I do agree we should all just make it work. That's a great aspirational suggestion, and I do think it's important that we do, as a council, set priorities and focus on things. You're right, we shouldn't be dealing with that at council level. Completely agree with you. But the only reason we're dealing with it now is because I got elected, I looked at the park, and I'm like, why is this problem that's so obvious and has an obvious solution hasn't been fixed in years? And it's, to me, the answer is because the system that we have to solve those problems doesn't work. And so I want to try to change it a little bit by making the the purpose of the park commission more clear and giving them the tools they need, whether it's budget or whatever else it is, to get things done. And we're making progress. I mean, I know that, when we point out problems, that it's contentious. It gets feelings get hurt. And, when you're talking about people's areas of responsibility and someone is supposed to get something done but doesn't have the tools or power to do it, then that's a very frustrating experience, and it upsets people. And, when they have a mission and it's not getting accomplished, that's frustrating and upsetting. And so I want to see what we can do to make the system better.
Okay.
May I comment, Mr. Mayor? I didn't sign up.
That's fine. Yeah, sure. Step right up. Just identify yourself for the record.
Don Hudson, 4902 Rollingwood Drive. I'm on the Park Commission and have been for a little over 2 years. Everything y'all are saying is correct. The Park Commission tries, but there is a lack of priority, for starters. And there's not a real huge viable base of skills in, like, I don't know how to maintain a park. I barely know how to maintain my yard. And so within the Park Commission, there's some talk about working more closely with City Council on things to where we know generally directions that you all would support. So we don't go off, just making stuff up and hoping it flies. And I've been put a lot of time in on a couple of these things that really seemed to make sense, but as I got into them, they just didn't. So having priorities well defined would be helpful. There's a definite desire to work more closely with City Council. Not big elaborate meetings, but just pass stuff down to us. And if we need your help and your input, we can ask for it. I like the idea of us conceivably having access to a landscape architect, although, as has been pointed out, it's more about maintenance than new projects at this point. And I walked the park yesterday with Victoria Johnson, and we've got 20 maintenance things, and that's disregarding the little ones. So there's a lot of maintenance that could be done. Anyway, that being said, the Park Commission as a group is very, very interested in the park being more beautiful, better maintained. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Yes, ma'am. I would like to, we've been on this for 30 minutes, and it was announced that there would be no action on it when we started it, so I would like to wrap it up pretty quickly.
Shanti Jayakumar, 3009 Park Hills Drive.
Thank you, Shanti.
I just want to give a big credo to Don Hudson here, because this is work that he did. You may not remember it, but it's in my files. And it is from, you did this, Don. You made this.
Yes.
And it's so detailed and so excellent.
The Park Commission weren't interested.
Okay, I'm going to let them be the judge of that. So, because you've spent a lot of time, effort, since I brought it with me, I think I should use it. Okay. There's 2 sheets there. That's his work.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. You want it?
Here, Charlie needs one.
So, take a look and see all the detail that has gone into this. And there was another sheet that I didn't copy, but that's got all the dates that y'all went around. And what happened was, many of the Park Commission meetings were canceled. Okay? This was done in 12/05/22. January 11th, the meeting was canceled. February, there was a meeting. March, it was canceled. April, it was there. May, it was canceled. So they haven't had a quorum, maybe. I don't know what the reason is. So they have been strapped for meetings to discuss this. And I think this is an excellent, excellent piece of work done. Well, okay, but this is a start. This is the type of thing which outlines what needs to be done in the park. And hats off to you for that. Thank you. All right, you guys can decide what to do.
Mayor, I know we want.
Thank you, Shanti. This is useful. This is good. Yes, sir.
I know we want to move off of this, and believe me, I do too, but, I think watching the Park Commission, and I was the former chair of the Park Commission, I think they're at an inflection point, and I think if the Park Commission is willing to take the list of issues that they've identified in the walkthroughs and maybe somehow prioritize those, then we can start breaking it down into maintenance or capital improvements or whatever, and start nibbling away at the ones that the Park Commission has identified as being the highest priority, the things that they would most like to get done. And, you know, I think that's something where they can bring that forward to the city council or maybe to the city administrator, and we can start working through those issues. It doesn't seem that complicated. So I'd just like to put that out as a possibility of a strategy of action. And I know when I was on Park Commission, every time Lori Mills walked past that pavilion, she said, this needs to be taken care of. So I do think that's probably going to come back as the first priority is going to be that area around that pavilion. And I would agree with that. So.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Short comment.
Yes, yes,
And
yes,
that
and yes.
is, I would love to see the Park Commission also identify 1 or 2 fundraising activities that would be fun for the entire community and start getting some money to do some of these things. You know, we have, I think the survey that the CRCRC just did says, you know, trees and the park are high priorities. The comprehensive plan said that. We're now enough post-COVID that we can identify something, you know, a night in the park, you know, whatever, that would be a fundraiser. And let's start thinking about that. It'd be a community builder and a fundraiser, and people have fun, and we get more money, and we can.
I agree with
plant
fundraising, but
trees.
I think tying fundraising to projects where people know exactly what the money is going to be used for and that type of thing.
Not, that can be done.
Yeah,
You know,
I'm just
that can be done.
suggesting that that's the way to do fundraising, particularly in
I'm
the
not
park
gonna,
when it's this good.
let's let them figure that out
Okay.
and bring it to us.
All right.
You know, I think that's a good idea. I would agree with you, but we can't nickel and dime it here and also ask them to take it on, you know. I think we've gotta. But that, on a broad scale, I would like to see that. Some kind of-
Mayor?
Some fundraising.
No, that's good. And yes, Ms. Patil, you're recognized. And I'll just say, Don, that there are a number, this is really good. and I think there are a number of these things that can go on what we lovingly refer to as our operations Gantt chart.
I worked that out with Vicky. She and I walked the park.
Okay.
We did it for a couple hours, made an elaborate list. I didn't just make this up.
Yeah, no, there's some good stuff on here.
An 11 by 17.
I may need that because I am having trouble to read some of it. Yeah. Ms. Patillo.
Amy Patillo, 3 Rockaway Cove. So I really appreciate the wording that you used of this agenda item of the role of the Park Commission. And it's something that I have seen the Park Commission function with a lot of different roles over the years. I served on the Park Commission for 3 years and saw different roles that it functioned in. And one practice that we used to have, but that we don't have anymore, that might be worth considering, is in keeping the role of the Park Commission more tightly coupled to what the current council is doing, was that the chair of the Park Commission would come to almost every council meeting and provide the report of the Park Commission's activities. And in the event the chair couldn't attend the meeting, then the liaison would have that report and would have coordinated with the chair prior to the meeting to have the report that the chair would like presented to the council. And so actually in our council agendas as a city at that time, every commission had its own agenda item where there could be a report. Now, for time management purposes,
Thanks for doing that to us, Amy.
I don't know that it was keeping the meetings as short as they are now. But it's just to suggest that there have been some practices in the past that I would say the most important meeting or the most important time that the chair would come to the council was annually before the budget process. The chair would actually come with the Park Commission's priority list and would come to the council and present it, and come to RCDC and present it, and would receive that feedback and then take it back to the Park Commission. And so while it definitely kept the council communicating with the Parks Commission, it put that onus of leading the Parks Commission on whoever was chairing. And it was Tony Hudson Henley at that time, and she served for, I think, 10 years and did an amazing service to our community of serving that long and had such an amazing history of everything. So that's just something to throw out there that as you're thinking about the role. I actually served before there was a Parks Master Plan, and part of the reason there was a Parks Master Plan is that all of the same things that are being discussed right now, still even with that system, would come up. And so we went to the code and we were like, oh, we don't have a Parks Master Plan. That's part of our role. We should have one. And so it was simple as that, to try to come up with something. So those are just thoughts on role that maybe involving the chair a little bit more. And there was a vice chair as well of the Parks Commission. And so there's a little bit more of that top leadership structure that was invested.
I think that's a great idea, and the ordinance actually says that the Park Commission's going to come give a monthly report at council meetings, and that's not happening. And I think the Park Master Plan's a good point, because maybe it needs to be revised and readopted annually, and that's a way of getting council to engage with the Park Commission, is by agreeing annually that this is our master plan for this year, and this is what we're going to try to do this year. I think that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, so I think that the tools might be in the code. It's just how they're being exercised.
Sure.
And
maybe so.
Communicating with some of the people who've done it in the past to get ideas. And when Phil was chair, I think there were, he had things that he was working on, and it was a different season than when Tony was chair. And so each chair, I think, also takes on a little bit of that existing long-term identity of what the Parks Commission has been, and then also their own things.
Thank you for all that.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Patillo. Good, robust conversation, lots of food for thought. We will do more of that later.
Oh, boy.
But for tonight, we will move off of agenda item number 19 and on to agenda item number 20, discussion and possible action regarding an exception to the curfew for stargazing night. Left this one to the end so that when you left here this evening, you would get to look at some stars. Winter is
Jupiter's been bright.
winter is my favorite stargazing time of year.
It's a great
So,
time.
with that, Mr. Glasheen, this is your item.
Orion should be
Recognized.
rising about right now,
Yep.
and the Pleiades and Gemini are very visible.
Yep.
So I got an email from a resident whose husband is an amateur astronomer, and they'd gone out and set up their telescope to do some observing, and along came the Rollingwood police, who kicked them out of the park for being outside past curfew.
We just enforce them. We don't ride them.
So I thought I will just address this, and it could be a matter of prosecutorial discretion that lets a resident stay in their telescope. If we gave guidance to the police department, it may not require any more action than that. But I think that it's perfectly reasonable for a resident of Rollingwood to be out there with a telescope and not be run off from the park. So what I'd like to tell them is that I'd like to tell them, because they like to do this occasionally, maybe once a month or something, tell them, if you're gonna go up there, just let the city administrator know or the police department know that you're gonna be there, and it'll be okay. Okay, then contact the police department, just tell them that you're gonna be there, that you're a resident, you're gonna be stargazing, and that they won't kick you
I like
out.
stargaze. They could actually call the mayor on that one.
Okay. or making astronomical observations.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to address that, so that may be sufficient.
I don't, Ms. Brown.
Do they need to be over 18?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Stargazing, like laying on their backs in the park, looking. I think they should have to have a telescope if they're gonna be out there. If they have a telescope.
Well,
that's okay.
I'll circle up with the chief. I'm sure we can make some.
I'm gonna let them know that it's
We'll
gonna
make
be
some
okay.
reasonable accommodation
Okay.
for scientific pursuits.
Other than biology.
Yeah, the right. Yes,
If
yeah, right.
they're willing to notify the police, then,
Okay. I don't know. We can work on something.
I think so. I think it could be as simple as just notifying us that they're gonna be out there.
I think so.
And then, but we'll circle up and we'll, figure something out for them.
I'll let them know that that's what they should do.
They should really go to your ranch though, because they're not gonna have quite the viewing experience that.
Everybody should go to my ranch.
Okay. Any other comments, items? With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
You have a motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, council. You're adjourned.